This week, a sitting member of Congress stood on the House floor and entered an anti-Israel, anti-American, and largely anti-Semitic conspiracy theory into the Congressional Record. Thomas Massey of Kentucky, a lame duck congressman who just lost his primary and has nothing left to lose, no voters left to answer to, used the most credentialed platform available to him to claim that the State of Israel deliberately murdered American sailors aboard the USS Liberty 59 years ago during the 6 Days War. Until very recently, USS Liberty conspiracy theories, which often include an assertion that our own government either conspired with Israel to kill our own sailors or covered up the crime on behalf of a foreign government, was mostly relegated to the fringe blogs or crackpot influencer side of the internet. Today, the conspiracy theory is taken as an article of faith among the black-pilled dissidents on the American right. Now, that article of faith is an official part of the Congressional Record and will be forever. Massey's remarks weren't on a late-night AM talk radio show or some Substack. This was the floor of the United States House of Representatives, and a man who swore an oath to the Constitution chose to spend one of his last acts in Congress giving institutional legitimacy to a claim that, until recently, lived primarily in the fever swamps of anti-Semitic literature. That migration of the lie from the fever swamps of the fringe to the U.S. Capitol building itself is one of the more troubling things that's happened in an era of troubling things. Today, President Trump declared that the U.S. will resume strikes on Iran. In his words, quote, attacking them and attacking them very hard. It's times like this you wish you could do a great Donald Trump impersonation. I can't. He said this after Iran downed one of our own Apache helicopters. And just about the very first thing that I saw online about the Apache getting shot down was commentator Alex Jones and others on the dissident right accusing Israel of a false flag attack meant to drag America back into fighting, quote, Israel's war, suggesting it's not a coincidence that it happened on the very anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty. On my personal X feed, I struggle to find a single post about the rapidly escalating conflict in Iran, but there was Alex Jones blaming Israel for it. And of course, yesterday, Karmelo Anthony was convicted of the murder of Austin Metcalf. Now, that did make my feed, but, well, what made my feed was actually a bunch of leftists standing outside of a courthouse demanding the release of a murderer whose side they've simply taken because of the color of his skin, while on the other side, I saw an increasing set of calls from people like Nick Fuentes for white people to mirror that black racial solidarity and black racial collectivism. Needless to say, the news and information landscape is just a complete mess. The left and the dissident right are competing brands of the exact same underlying product. I don't like the sort of idea that there's only one party, that we live in a one-party state, that both of the parties agree on everything. That's nonsense. There's a reason that we have Democrats, a reason that we have Republicans, and a reason that Republicans need to defeat Democrats. But the far left and the far right are becoming increasingly married to the exact same set of ideas. Both of them tell you that the country is going to pot. Both of them tell you that your circumstances are someone else's fault, that the system is the problem, that trying won't work and voting won't work and even governing won't work. The only way out, they say, is to burn it down. The left packages all of this as systemic oppression. The right packages it as stolen greatness, but the destination is identical. A person who has surrendered his own agency to whichever movement most convincingly tells him he was wronged. That's a catastrophe. It's a catastrophe for individuals, and it's a catastrophe for republics. A year ago, I left a company that I co-founded and led for a decade, a company which started in my pool house and which we built into one of the largest digital media operations in the country. Over my tenure, the Daily Wire earned and deployed $1 billion into the conservative movement. We broke huge talent, we broke huge stories, we made movies and hit documentaries, we launched brands and businesses and books, we won lawsuits, and we changed laws around the country. We impacted elections, and we impacted the law, and we impacted the culture because we won. We won consistently, and we won frequently. And we won consistently and we won frequently because we believed that we could, that no one else was likely to do it if we didn't, that there was no expert to hire or authority to whom we could appeal. We just had to do. And having done, we had to do well, and we had to win. In the months that followed my departure, people kept asking me what I was going to do next. And to be honest, the question kind of confused me because to me, it was just an obvious answer. Like I was just going to continue doing what I've always done. I was going to continue being what I've always been. And for the most part, that's still true. I'm just going to do what I do, which is what I've always done. I'm going to make things. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to build teams. I'm going to score points for my movement and for my country. I'm going to win, even though I've gone through an awful lot of loss. Because, as a great man once said, winners are just losers who win. Well, all right, it wasn't actually a great man who said it, but it was a man with a great point. I launched this show not because I've always dreamed of being a podcast host. If I'd wanted to be a podcast host, I would have launched a podcast back when I ran one of the biggest podcast networks in the country. I promise you that would have been considerably easier than what we've been doing here these last 10 weeks. Now, I launched this show because it was the first thing I was able to do. And an object at rest remains at rest. Its fundamental nature is not to win. It's not even to do. It's just to, well, it's to nothing. But an object in motion, well, virtually any motion at all is better than doing nothing, because then the fundamental nature of the object in motion is to remain in motion. An object in motion can overcome an enormous number of anti-motion forces that exist in the universe. An object in motion can have impact. An object at rest only produces energy when it's smashed into by an object that is in motion. And that's who I want to be. My exit from the Daily Wire didn't contra what Buckley Carlson said in a tweet about me this week, bankrupt me. On the contrary, I have enough money to live a wonderful life for the rest of my life without ever working again, at least in theory. See, my core belief is that there's no such thing as a wonderful life without work. God made us to work, to participate in the divine act of creation, to tend the garden and to name the animals and to subdue the earth. We're creatures built by our Creator for purpose and meaning and given the unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is just the act of pouring ourselves out in the service of our mission. So I'm spending the money that I could be retiring on to get back to that work. This show doesn't have an investor other than me. It doesn't have a donor other than me or a sponsor other than me. There's no paid subscriber, there's no advertiser, there's no grant or license fee. Now, that won't always be true. In success, we may very well and hopefully will have many of those things in time. I'm not one of these guys who says, well, I'm going to be an independent voice and no one can own me. The truth is, a lot of independent voices are owned. They're owned by audience capture. No, succeeding monetarily is actually how we keep score in business. And I want my business to win, which means we're actually going to have to make some money at some point. But for today, this is a labor of love. I pay my employees out of my pocket. I'm starting over as a true startup. It's pure risk. But building the future is always pure risk, even when you have investors, and even when you have donors, and even when you have sponsors. It's pure risk, and it's pure effort, and it's producing in me pure happiness, despite all of my recent loss. Because it's agency. It's the idea that we can do, and if we can do, then we must do. The conservative movement is in crisis. Some of our loudest voices are spending their time espousing some of the worst ideas of all time. The best among us often lack the language to give voice to our perspective. The country is also in crisis. Our politics are broken, our economy is chaotic, our people feel insecure and unheard, and yet there's never been more opportunity. There's never been more opportunity to do well, and there's never been more opportunity to do good either. So that's my hope for this new venture, that we might help give people back their voice by giving them language with which to use it, that we might help to defeat those terrible ideas, that we might help to, in the long run, win the battle for our people and the battle for our economy and the battle for our politics and our country, that we might create a better media where conspiracy and engagement farming aren't the coin of the realm. In short, that we might work with our hands and earn our bread and earn our happiness while doing good and trusting God. So today I want to spend a little bit of time with the team that's helping me in that effort. I want you to get to know them, and I want you to get to know what motivates them as individuals and what motivates us as a team. You're going to be hearing a lot from these guys over the years as we continue this journey together. I've always said the future belongs to those who build it. Tonight, I'm joined with the team who is helping me in my hope to build a little piece of that right here with the Jeremy Boring Show. Joined by John Lewis and Joel Berry. Both have been on the show before, but tonight they're here not just as guests, they're here as the people in the room who are with me every day making this thing. And joining us for the first time is the executive producer of the show, Alyssa Cordova. She was one of my top lieutenants along with John Lewis at the Daily Wire. John, Joel, Alyssa, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And for funding us. That's nice.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No. You make me a little poorer every day.
It's not a little.
It's not a little.
A lot poorer.
Yeah, a lot. I get a lot poorer day by day. Alyssa, it's fun to have you on the show for the first time, in particular because Candace Owens often says that you work from the shadows.
Yes.
She mentions you a lot. I'm actually sad because Candace, while she obviously doesn't care much for old Jer, she's never once actually implied that I'm a part of the plot to kill Charlie Kirk. But you've gotten implicated.
Yeah, I think I got past. I have to go look up exactly what the phrasing was, but in one of her early rants about me, I think sometime last year, it was when everyone who was on her radar was getting some sort of they're in on it or this and that and whatever. I got a passive implication. So yes, I'm out of the shadows. I generally prefer the shadows. Even Joel was shocked to see me with makeup and my hair done today.
Yeah, I sat down and I was just kind of looking at my phone, and then I looked up. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Alyssa. Yeah.
But I was gonna make a joke that I just forgot to book guests on the show. But what's funny is I actually very intentionally wanted to do this episode with this team because of everything you said in the monologue and everything that we're doing here and endeavoring to do, and the three of us, our history together. And actually we have history with Joel too that sort of tangential, and it's fun to have him now here with us. But like you, I have been in the conservative movement for over 2 decades now, since I was a teenager. And I'm passionate about it, something I've always cared a lot about. And I have been devastated over the last, year, 18 months, a couple of years, just how everything is devolving. So if it means I have to come out of the shadows and actually, engage in a different way, then I'm happy and willing to do that.
Well, it's exciting for me. When you first left the Daily Wire, you and John and I spent a lot of time together in those first days, eating our feelings and
so many chocolate chip cookies.
So many
we
chocolate.
even took a trip to London.
Took a trip to London to see what their chocolate chip cookies were all about.
They were mostly disappointing, actually.
But during that time, you said, "Hey, if you ever start a show, I would like to shadow your producer so that I can just understand a little bit more what executive producers of shows do." And I thought from that very moment you said it, well, you should just be my executive producer. I mean, we work so closely every day at Daily Wire. You have an amazing instinct for brand, an amazing instinct for messaging, and you're completely on mission. One of the things that really animated our time at Daily Wire, and in particular that core team of which you and John were sort of the principal members, is that we kept the company on task. We kept the company mission focused during those years. And so, knowing that you had that commitment to the mission and also that you understood the brand and cared about brand, and I thought made you a really natural fit for this role. And you weren't here from the very first episodes, but when we finally convinced you to join, it was a real relief, I think, for both John and I to have you back on the team. So,
well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here. Really glad to be here. Although I did not calculate, getting every show out every day or 3 days a week is always a little bit of a crisis in the last couple of hours. It's extra crisis when you're also on the show that day. I didn't calculate that.
Silently panicking because he's not in the control room.
Right. We don't know what's going on. I don't even know if we're live.
I don't even know if we're live. Who knows? Who knows what's happening right now? Whether the cameras are on, whether
right.
Rolling.
Yeah.
No, I'd echo that. The relief when Alyssa joined, because it takes a little convincing to get Alyssa on. And I think all of us had our moments of wondering whether we would get back in the fight, but probably also deep down knew, of course, we would and needed to. But I remember when we were at lunch and she came and I think the message to you was, you just need to come do this and just bring a box of cookies to apologize for not being on the team already. And so we're at lunch, and Alyssa just at the end sets a box of cookies on the table. And I just thought, oh, thank God.
Well, actually, what was extra funny is I think it registered with Jeremy quicker, and then we were talking, and then there was a beat, and John goes, wait, so are you actually saying yes? Is this actually happening right now? Yeah. And I just watched something melts off of him. So that was
it was something that we wrestled with all the time at Daily Wire, which was, and Alyssa, I think we had a lot of conversations about this where, there's always a temptation maybe to go do something else. And there's even a thought, well, someone else will do this job. Like, it's okay, someone else will take over. And one of the things that I think we've experienced in launching this show, when you think about recruiting for this, is there's not. Like the thing that we did at Daily Wire was unique. And every time I thought about that, I thought, well, if Alyssa steps out of this role, or in this case, she's not here on our team, there's not another person to get. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't get someone else and train and work and fight and put all the work in. But the experience that you and all of us obviously had from the Daily Wire through all of the many battles and many wars that we went through, won many of them, lost some of them even, and probably learned even more from those, do create a set of skills and abilities that I think at the end of the day, you look at it and kind of like the story of the talents, you just feel like, oh no, I've been given these abilities, and there's probably never been a more important time in the movement to apply them. Like we feel so outnumbered. This is the biggest voices, the largest voices now. We used to fight those on the left. You know, I remember when Obama was reelected, I thought, but all this guy does is apologize for America. All he does is talk about how bad we are, and that's what everybody's voting for. And I thought, man, the conservative movement has never been more needed, and we've got to win. We actually have to lead the conversation. Joining the Daily Wire, I felt like we were able to achieve that on so many fronts. We got real victories for the movement. And now we're back in this spot where instead of the left apologizing for the country, we have, I hate to even say that they're on the right. I think that's something we have to figure out and get past, figure out how to reposition these players, because they're not on the right. But they're doing the same thing. They're apologizing for America, and some of the largest podcast hosts in the world, and now, on the House floor, speeches that are being deployed to just apologize and say that America is now the enemy to the free people is just awful. So glad you're on the team and executive producer, and I too feel the crisis of every episode and getting them out. And there are also little victories as well, another episode, another episode is out.
Labor, like having a child, 3 times a week, you're so relieved, and it's like, oh shoot, I got to do this again tomorrow.
But what's amazing to think about is that over the course of a decade of building the Daily Wire, we built so many systems. And sort of your point about how we felt when Alyssa came on, and it's a company is just people. All a company is people. All a government is people. A lot of conspiracy theories exist because you sort of ascribe a kind of expertise. You assign a kind of power and a kind of competence that doesn't actually exist in the real world. Like nothing. When you go to work and you deal with your coworkers, it probably doesn't seem possible to you that they could, mastermind these vast. Well, that's exactly what the White House is like. When you go to work at the White House, some of the people are very impressive. Some of them are not very impressive. Some of them are just kids who are there because their parents made some donations. Some of them are interns. It's just a place. It's a place filled with people, and the character of those people ultimately has an awful lot to do with the success, the experience of the people, the competence of the people. But there's no such thing as expertise. There's no such thing as omnipotence or omniscience or the kind of power that would afford. It's broken, flawed people doing the best job they can, and sometimes not even the best job they can, in really difficult circumstances without access to really clear information. You think that they're all knowing, that the government knows everything, but that's a silly, the government is nothing. The government is a broad noun that represents hundreds of thousands or millions of people employed across thousands of departments across, right? The president doesn't know everything, and his immediate team doesn't know everything. They have limited information coming to them in real time by which they're trying to make decisions. And that's how it is in a company. That what you do over time in a company is you build systems to be able to deal with information as it comes in, to make sure that information is properly disseminated. You have teams that make sure these shows go out. The three of us at Daily Wire on a daily basis never thought about whether or not the shows would go out. We had Pavel Wadowski down there, running the set, or we had David Wormus, our head of production, making sure that the team was there. We had individual show producers like Mathis and Ben Davies. Ben Davies, who, as it turns out, is not only a really good producer, but kind of like a creative genius who's creating all these new formats for Michael Knowles, which I really resent because I would like some new formats, and you kind of hate to see Michael doing well.
You have 3 formats.
I do have 3 formats. Yeah, I do have 3 formats. That's fair. But I say all of that only to say that we're now starting over, and sort of we operated way above a lot of the things that we're now actually having to do. We're doing the work that interns on some occasions during our day-to-day life. Now we're doing what the interns used to do. Certainly we're doing what middle management might have done in the past or whatever, and really getting our hands back into the soil. But it's still true that all a government is, or all a company is the people. And so the team that we had, it's not that we haven't reconstructed that whole team. I mean, obviously there are 275 people at the Daily Wire the day I left, but my core team was the two of you on a day-to-day basis. Maybe Josh Herr, our GC, was a part of kind of that inner circle. Caleb Robinson, the co-CEO, was a part of that circle, and that's really who I interacted with day in and day out for all of those years. And so to have the majority of that team reconfigured here gives me just huge confidence that we'll be able to achieve a lot of victories for the movement, which means a lot of victories for ourselves. Because listen, self-interest is part of what motivates any endeavor. The point of an endeavor, I kind of alluded to this in the opening monologue, like how you keep score in an endeavor is by keeping score. Some of that's monetary, not all of it. Some of it's by the success of the content. It's by, you have to have views. You have to have an audience. You have to have actual successes culturally. You have to actually make things. We have to make a lot more than we're currently making. We have to do an awful lot more than we're currently doing. These are the earliest days of what we're building. But in the end, it's about rightly ordering all of those priorities. It's good to have self-interest be one of your priorities. It's good for Joel to want to get more and more money out of my pocket all the time. Because that motivates you to keep pushing and keep winning and keep driving. But it's bad if that becomes your driving priority. It's bad for you as an individual if money is your driving priority. It's terrible for you as a missional business, which is what we are, if money is your overriding priority. The top priority has to be the mission. And I think that's true in your life too. Your top priority has to be your mission. I think that too many people approach their lives as though like roles are a replacement for mission. And so people will say, I think this is a huge problem for Christian men in particular in the country right now. They'll say things like, I want work-life balance. I want, it's important that I spend as much time as humanly possible with my children. I'm not even sure if I want my children to know I have a job. I want to be home so much. A study came out this year that says men in America are spending twice as much time with their kids as they've ever spent in all of recorded history. The most fascinating thing, though, to me about that survey is that even though men are spending twice as much time with their children, let's call it active parenting for a minute, for lack of a better term, even though they're spending double the amount of time active parenting, women are spending even more time with their children. So if historically you think women spent the majority of their time with in active momming, and men spent a minority of their time active dadding because they were at work, well, you might think, well, it makes sense now women are working and men have achieved work-life balance, so it makes sense that men are taking on more of that workload and women are taking on less of that workload. But that's not what the data suggests. It says men are taking on more of the workload and women are taking more of the workload of actively parenting children. And one of the things that no one wants to say out loud is that what the study really says, what the study really reveals, if you just look at the state of young people in this country, is that we are now over-parenting. That men aren't doing a better thing by spending all of this extra time. Doesn't mean that adjustments don't need to be made. Maybe men in certain generations have spent too little, of course. But our children are, to borrow from Abigail Schreier, our children are like the most drugged, the most anxious, the most micromanaged children that have ever. Well, they're the most micromanaged, and the result is that they're the most anxious, the least confident, the least educated that they've ever been, and yet men feel good about it because we've misordered, we've wrongly ordered our priorities. The job dad isn't the mission. The mission is the mission of a father is to raise successful adults. Raising successful adults isn't exclusively about work-life balance and how much time you spend active dadding. A lot of what it means to be a dad is not about active dadding. It's about being pushing back against too much active momming. It's about letting the chicks fall out of the nest and letting the kids get hurt and letting them have independence. That's historically been a major part of the job of being a father. In other words, the very thing that we thought or that we not thought, the very thing that we now think is bad about the way that fathers have approached children was actually one of the good things about what a father represented in the relationship between father and mother and child. And so when we think about how to rightly order the priorities of life, I think that it's not enough to say job bad, fatherhood good. Like that, first of all, that's incredibly rudimentary and simple. God didn't put you here on earth to be a father. He put you, as you've pointed out, John, God created man to work before he even gave him a helpmate. And what's the helpmate for? It's a helpmate to help in the work. And that's before they had children. You know, the command to be fruitful and multiply comes after the introduction of the helpmate, and the helpmate is a helper in the work. God made man to participate actively in the divine act of creation. Now, one reason that men don't feel that that's important, or that that feels somehow like a wrong thing to say, is because men also approach their work the wrong way, as though having a job and doing the job is the purpose. But no, your work is also part of your mission. Your work should be part of your mission. Your work should be part of how you find meaning, should be part of how you find identity. It should be part of how you contribute your values forward into the world, how you project. It's not just a thing you do to get money. It's a thing you do to push your values out into the world, to create a future for yourself and for your children. Yes, to create sustenance. Yes, to make money. It's good for those to be your interests. But even going to work, the top priority of going to work should not be to make money. A priority of going to work should be to make money. The top priority of going to work should be to participate in the divine act of creation. A secondary priority in going to work should be to model work for your sons, which is part of being a father, is to model work. So if your kids don't know you have a job, then you're not even modeling doing the thing that God created man to do for your children. And so in all of these ways, our modern culture has caused us to reorder our priorities in a way that sometimes sounds good. Oh, it's so good that you want to spend time with your kids and not spend time at that dusty old job, which we only do for money anyway. But everything about what you just said is wrong. The reason you've even arrived at those conclusions is because your view of that entire structure is not biblical, that your view of that entire structure is false. And so I say it's a very long-winded way of saying that what we're trying to do here is correctly order our priorities, so that what we're doing is fundamentally about our mission, and not just what we're doing with our job, what we encourage each other to do in our life as fathers, what we encourage each other to do in our interactions with our friends, is always about, can we rightly order those priorities? And I certainly would not suggest that we do that perfectly well all of the time. But it is the purpose of what we're doing. It is the thing to which we aspire. And hopefully the thing that the audience can sense from us, and maybe the journey that we're helping build an audience around. I don't care to say to, the dissident right, the proof of the success of our show is how big our view count is. I'd like a big view count because that's part of how you keep score. But I want to be able to say that the proof of the success of our show is that we have an audience that understands how to rightly order the priorities of their lives. Yeah. That they're participating not just in roles, but they're participating in mission across all of the roles of their life. And in doing that, I feel that we are fulfilling our actual mandate and the reason that God's given us these gifts and opportunities.
Yeah, well, it's as the starry-eyed newbie who was shaped in a lot of ways by the Daily Wire. I think the biggest kinship I feel with you three is the fact that whatever this thing is that I do, I'm obligated to do. I can't not do it. 15 years ago, I was in corporate sales, and it was long conservative treatises on Facebook. That was my only outlet. Then it was the Babylon Bee. Now, I could almost cry. I'm so thankful to be here. It's another outlet to do whatever this thing is that I would be doing anyway. If I was a hobo on the street, I'd be scratching little thoughts and ideas onto the sidewalk. I think that's just such a beautiful thing about how God created us. When we grow into the way God designed us, who He made us to be, the talents that He gave us, and we can use that to build something beautiful, put our values out into the world. Like I said, the view count becomes secondary. But one thing I also appreciate about this team here, and just your emphasis, Jeremy, is that we're not like hoity-toity, like, you know, oh, well, it's not about the money, it's not about the views, you know, we're just, you know, we just start, you know, like, we got to win too.
Gotta
Like, we're a
win.
business, we have to win, we have to make money. The numbers do matter, not just because of vanity, but because we do want to get our message out there. You know, in order to get the message out there, you have to understand the algorithm, you have to understand how to get numbers, how to go viral. There's like two deep trenches of error that the conservative media space seems to fall in now. One is like the audience capture, you know, Candace just completely following the audience. And the other is like, I'm going to tell the truth even if I go down with the ship and lose every battle. And it's like, no, you still have to win. There's a middle ground there that you have to walk. And I think that's what we're trying to do here anyway.
Yeah, you actually have a responsibility to win.
Yeah.
When you say, I'm willing to lose, if the price of saying the truth is that I lose, you're granting a false binary. It's not the cost of telling the truth. The cost of telling the truth is not that you must lose, but it is often the case that the people who tell the truth lose because they don't understand that they have an obligation to win while telling the truth. Winning while telling the truth is very hard. It requires you to innovate. You know, it's much easier to win spreading lies.
Yeah, I think that's the real challenge for the show right now. Some people have even tried to say that, you know, like, oh, I love what you guys are doing, and like as if we're forsaking the views. They assume that because we're speaking the truth. Yeah. And we all kind of intuit in this moment that saying the things that we're saying are not how you win with the algorithms. And probably none of us fully understand why that is the case right now. Even our best videos are ones that are like, you know, the truth about Israel or something. And I think that most of those clicks are probably people like, yeah, tell me more about how bad Israel is. And then they're probably really disillusioned, and then they're angry in the comments at us, you know, because like, oh, you guys. And so it's not currently winning. But to your point, Jeremy and Joel, you have to figure that out.
That's right.
It doesn't mean you change what you're saying. It means what you're saying is more important than ever. If those are the voices that are being really elevated kind of in every way and all the time and repeated in almost like this hypnotic way where you just see this like kind of like tidal wave moving through the country and these changing views, you go, well, that's now the problem to solve. It's not enough to just say the truth. You have to say the truth to a much larger audience. And now the question is, how do you get that out and get them? And that's always been the challenge. You put Israel in the title every time. That's right.
I know. Well, yeah, that you immediately realize when you're the one in charge of thumbnails and titles and all this stuff, and you see what does pop up and what doesn't. You can see how quickly people could fall into algorithm and audience capture, because there are ways we could title and construct things differently than we do now that would probably immediately get us some views, but they would undermine the actual message that we're trying to get out and what we're trying to do. I did want to say, you know, John, you mentioned that it took convincing for me to come here. And transparently, that's because I knew it was going to be really hard. And for the last year, I've been working with some great people and still involved in the movement, but I've been working for myself. I've been working remotely. I was spending a lot of time at the lake. I had this year of life where I, you know, it was very relaxing, honestly. And my time at the Daily Wire was the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the most rewarding thing I've ever done. And again, I said, you know, I've been in the conservative movement for a couple of decades, and I've worked for some great people and done great work, but had always felt frustrated that the movement, a lot of the people in the movement seemed short-sighted and small-minded. And I wanted to win, and I didn't know how. And when the Daily Wire came on the scene, I thought, well, if I could ever work somewhere, I would want to go to the Daily Wire. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something was different. And I knew it from the context of being in the movement for so long. And so I ended up working there and kind of immediately realized why it's different, because nobody stops. Like, you don't stop at the easy thing. I remember having a conversation with you, John. Something was happening, and Amazon had done something woke or punished us for something woke. And my immediate reaction was like, we have to go to the press. And you said, no, it's basically like it's a cheap way to do it. We should actually try to win with Amazon, because it will be better for us. We will have a better result if we're able to do the thing that we need to do than just get the publicity from being canceled or whatever it was. And I never would have come to that conclusion. I don't know that I would have come to that conclusion on my own, but when you said it, it was like very exciting. Like it was this new thing that like, oh, what would it feel like to actually win? By winning, not just by losing, which was a consistent mantra. So I had to calculate when you asked me to come over here, because I knew whatever you guys are going to do, you're going to win. And I know what it takes to win, and it takes a lot.
It takes a lot.
But it is a lot more satisfying.
That was always my closing in any recruiting pitch. Anytime we were hiring someone, especially anybody senior at the company, was why you shouldn't work here.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this is going to be the hardest job that you've ever had. I didn't care if they're coming from Facebook or from Google or from Disney. We hired from all of those places. And I remember I gave you this speech too, and I think I remember your comments afterwards where you're like, you thought like, nah, I've worked in hard places. And everyone thought that. And I'm like, yeah, it won't be that hard. And then without fail, every single person, this is the hardest job I've ever had. Like, this was without a doubt. Like, I don't even understand. And people they were kind of like at a loss about it because just the speed of what happens in news and in media like this too. I remember they would sometimes bring me great creative ideas, things that would be like classic, like Daily Wire, kind of like You Got the Left or whatever, but they'd be 24 hours too late, because it would have happened 48 hours ago. And I'd say, we can't, that's a great idea. We can't do that. And I remember they would just think like, what are you talking about?
That was 2 days ago.
That was 2 days ago. We moved heaven and earth to get you this idea. And it's like, no, it's just not, it won't matter. Like, it won't, put a dent in the internet. Like, we have to be faster than that. And push and push and push constantly. And you're right, after 4, 5, 6 years of that, it's a pretty relentless pace. But
I'm hard to work for. That's just the truth. I used to give that speech routinely at the company. You only win by winning, and this is not an easy place to work, and I'm not an easy guy to work for. Like, another part of the speech that I would give this almost every 10. We had these things called 10:30 meetings. I would give it at least once a week. That you don't succeed here on the basis of your past successes. That if we had a weakness in the company, is that we almost never stopped to celebrate our successes because the need for the next one was always right at hand. Because I knew that the gears could seize up at any moment. It doesn't matter how much success you've had in the past. You're only kind of as good as your next success. And that I didn't want the company to operate from a victim mentality. The conservative movement, by and large, has always been primarily run by nonprofits, and nonprofits win by losing. They win by fundraising off of their losses. Oh, Amazon did something bad to us, please give us money. And then donors are like, screw Amazon, here's $500 or whatever.
Well, we monetized that for a good long while too.
But you guys changed the landscape of media.
Then you had the biggest victory of all time. Yeah. But we never would do that at Daily Wire in those days because I always felt that you could win short-term doing that, but you can't have a long-term success as a victim. You can only have the long-term success as a victor. And so we pursued victory all the time. And I think it's why we had high turnover. People would get burned out.
Yeah.
High turnover, people who were going to be great at people would do the best work of their life at Daily Wire. They would go on to be the most valued person at whatever company that they went to next. Because of having gone through that kind of gauntlet, that crucible. But it was hard. And most people couldn't take it for too long. And we never apologized for it. Like, there wasn't a single time that I was like, oh, yeah, man, we'll do better. No, I would say this is not work-life. If you're looking for work-life balance, go somewhere else.
Well, I think
we believe that's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, and to reiterate your point about the family too, because obviously everybody would kind of think, and they'd always ask me, because I'm married, I have 3 boys, like that must just be taking such a high toll. And of course at times it does. Like, there's things that you give up and sacrifice, and the family sacrifices, but the family is sacrificing for something, and it is for the victory. And they have a sense of that. My son today, when I was leaving, he's like, Dad, I hope it goes great today. Whatever you're doing, whatever you end up doing, like he feels it. Like, he's with me. He's on the team. We had to come in on Sunday and film, and my wife finds out about it late Friday. And because that's when we decided it. Because you realize that's the thing that you had to do. And she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "She's like, all right, oh yeah, you guys are doing it again." Like, that's spicy,
Give the context. What happened is that. On Friday, we normally write our monologues on Mondays, Sundays and Mondays, but Sunday is remote. We're just kicking ideas casually back and forth. Monday's a very hard writing day, sometimes 10 or 12 or more hours of writing. And then we shoot Tuesday morning for Tuesday afternoon release. Well, on Friday, we realized that Monday was the 59th anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty. And we further realized that Thomas Massey was going to give a speech on the House floor. And it was very clear from, Massey's behavior over the last 18 months, and particularly the last 16 or 18 days, what the character of that speech was going to be. And what we realized was, if part of the mission of this new venture, part of the mission of this show in particular, is to try to give people language to immunize them against the constant onslaught of despair, the constant onslaught of conspiratorial thinking, showing up late and commenting on it the day after makes you a news show, and we're not a news show. You have to give people the immunization before they get sick. So we realized we have to put something out that gives people the tools that they need to defend against what they're about to hear about the USS Liberty before that speech gets given on the House floor. And it was kind of a quick back and forth about, well, what would that actually mean to try to beat that? Well, it would mean that we have to find out when that speech is going live. Oh, it's going live at noon. Okay. Well, our show has to be out well in advance of that. Well, so what, will we shoot it at 3 in the morning? Well, of course you can't shoot it at 3 in the morning. What does it mean? Well, it means you work on Sunday. So when do we write it? Well, it means we write it on Saturday. Right, but it's Friday now and we really want a weekend. Well, you don't get one because today the choice that you get to make is let someone else bring this conspiracy to the largest audience that it's ever been exposed to, unimmunized, or try to get out ahead and get a little bit of immunization out into the culture before that moment happens. If you believe that that's important, then you do it. Now, you might say, most of the views on this episode happened after the Massey speech. So in a way, it wasn't a real victory. You didn't really do it. And I even agree that in a way that's true. But if you give yourself that as an out, if you give yourself permission to be late simply because it's too late to be as early as you might hope to be, well, now to borrow from Barack Obama, whom I very rarely borrow from, now you're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. And you're giving yourself permission to keep a tempo forever of being a reactor instead of a driver. And our only interest in doing this is in being drivers of the culture, to create culture, not just to react to culture. And so, in a way, even when we kind of lost the race on this particular issue, but we won it to the largest extent it was still possible for us to win it. And we didn't give ourselves permission to be late to the fight in the future by allowing ourselves to be late to this one. So, of course, my wife too, because Friday was also a long work day. I dragged myself into bed Friday night, and Ann said, "I'm glad we have a weekend." And I said, "About that." I said, we're not going to really get a weekend this weekend because I have to spend tomorrow doing my marathon writing session, and then the whole team is going to get together and we're going to shoot this thing on Sunday. And she was disappointed. And her reaction was to show me that disappointment. No, it wasn't. Her reaction was to say, "All right, let's go. Here's the mission. Here's the thing we have to do."
Yeah. Let's go. Because it is a helpmate. It is a family. And it is a collaborative effort, because I think you said this on one of the interviews recently, that if everything is okay and safe at home, then you're free to go to war with the world.
That's right.
Right? And there's so much truth to that. But back to your point, I just want to reemphasize it, which is that is the example that you have to set. If what you're saying to your family is this is the most important thing, then what you're constantly communicating to your kids in the ways that you spend time with them and engage with them is that the center of the universe is them. And that the mission of you and everything else is them. But that's not the mission for them. The mission for them is to grow up and have dominion and create in the world like we're creating in the world. So how else can you do that unless you actually are an example for them of what that looks like? And to your point, sure, you could be late, or you can lead, or you can drive, or you can create. And that's going to cost you something, right? It's going to cost you your weekend. It's going to cost, it's painful and hard, but so is everything great. Like all of the best things that I've ever done in my life, Marine Corps, boot camp, like all of it, the deployments, everything that has been the hardest moments of my life are the things that I look back on with the most pride and were obviously the most formative and character building and have turned you into something that you feel like makes you more useful to the world, you know, and that you can contribute something back to them. So modeling that, I think, for our sons, and for our sons to also see that that's a work of partnership with a husband and a wife, that takes that level of support to for a man to be able to get on the phone. And if same thing, of course my wife was disappointed, but also she's a go get him.
Yep.
You know? And as soon as you hear that, you're just like, oh, I could take on the world. I could do anything, you know, like, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah, I can attest to the eye-opening, you know, when you come into a place like this and you realize that really there's no secret sauce, there's no luck. It's really just you're working harder than anybody else. That's really all there is. How much sacrifice are you willing to make? How many walls are you willing to charge through? And kind of my first experience with this early on, with, you know, when we first started writing the beginning episodes, I remember kind of coming, you know, and writing a few things and being very satisfied with, like, wow, this is a real banger. You know, Jeremy's going to love this, and you did. And you, this is a really good start. You know, how can we make it 10% better? You know, all right, let's rewrite it, make it 10% better, put it back up on the screen. All right, that's good. How can we make it better? All right, let's get back and figure out how to make it better. You know, and then maybe the day comes and we've crafted this thing and fine-tuned it, and then it's like, you know what? This isn't what we need to be saying right now. We need to say something else. And that's the moment when it's the mission comes first.
Yeah.
You know, you're not precious about your writing, or you're not, you know, this Marxist kind of you know, theory of labor. You know, you're contributing to a mission, and you do whatever you have to do to accomplish that mission. Yeah. And that's kind of when I realized that, you know, this is going to push me in ways I've never been pushed before. You know, the Bee was the easiest job. I got to be snarky, and I got to sit in my garage, and I worked from home, and you know, my kids could come in, my wife could see me whenever they wanted. And now it really is. It's a, you know, my wife has had to make a sacrifice, and, you know, in seeing me not as much, and same thing with my kids, and same thing, you know, with you. She has been with me on this mission, and she's given me strength to accomplish the mission. And without her doing that, I would be walking in here with my shoulders slumped over, defeated. You know, our wives give us that, you know, when they're on mission with us, they give us that strength, you know.
Now, I can imagine that there are people who are listening and thinking, well, it's easy for you guys to say your job is a missional job, but I have a blue-collar job, or I have a white-collar corporate job in a soul-sucking office with fluorescent lights. So I'm sorry, but paper sales cannot be my mission. And I agree that it's easier to see why our job is missional, but I actually don't agree that the person who has a blue-collar job or a white-collar corporate job doesn't have a mission. In fact, first of all, it may be that what you're doing isn't a part of your mission. If that's true, you are doing the wrong thing. You need to find something else to do. Because I assure you that almost every job that exists has a missional component to it. You know, it may not be as obvious a missional component as ours. You need to be able to see it, though, in order for you to be on mission. And the purpose of your life is to be on your mission. God put you here for a reason. But, you know, I've been thinking a lot this week about parasocial relationships, because we're in the business of parasocial relationships. And it's interesting to think about, there's the obvious parasocial relationship between the audience and the host in any media enterprise, particularly in influencer culture. But there's also a parasocial relationship between the host and the audience. It's a different texture of parasocial relationship. And I was thinking, at first when I started considering parasocial relationships in the context of podcasts, I thought about it as a very negative thing, because it often manifests in very negative ways. Stalkers, or, you know, the fact that Candace Owens is audience, she cultivates a parasocial relationship at the highest level, very actively cultivates a parasocial relationship with her audience. And as a result, her audience absorbs from her things that they would never absorb in their personal lives. If a real person got caught in the behaviors that Candace often gets caught in, they would excise that person from their lives. Because of their parasocial relationship with Candace, they can't even see it about her. They think that she tells the truth. Candace cares less about the truth than any person I've ever met.
Absolutely. I mean, just even a small example. I mean, because obviously we all worked very closely, and, you know, got to spend a lot of time. But I couldn't believe it. Just the Laura Loomer, right, got the post. I think we all saw it, where she's obviously investigated and pulled out a lot of information about Candace and her family. And one of these incidents was the truck that was wrecked with, allegedly George Farmer, and had an issue. And so there's this, I think it was a Ram TRX, truck, and it's you can see it. It's all torn up and smashed. And I saw that, and then I just scrolling through saw another post, and it was Candace. Oh, all these vehicles are lies. Like, we never even owned that truck. And it's so weird. It's that moment where there's so much reality distortion from Candace, where even I was like, whoa, that's crazy. She didn't own that truck. And then you go, wait a second, I rode in that truck. Like George Farmer, I personally rode in that truck with George Farmer. Like, what are we talking about? Yes, like, how do you not own that truck? And it's like all the time you see things like, almost all the time with Candace too, especially, but obviously a lot of problem online with a lot of that. But it was just like, even I thought like, wow, she didn't own that truck. Weird.
Wait a minute, I rode in that truck.
I rode in.
It really is crazy making, because we're too close, not just to Candace, but just to this whole industry. Like, when you work in it, like, these people are your coworkers, you know them, they're your friends, all of that. You're not absorbing it the way the audience is absorbing it. It's just very different. And so it's the strangest thing to see something like that, and someone like Candace saying these things that for a fact are not true. And then you look around and millions of people are just believing it. And she says a bunch of things that I don't know anything about. I'm not privy to. But because I am privy to things that she's saying that I know aren't true, to me it calls into question everything else. And you feel like you're just sort of shouting into a void to the millions of people who are eating it up.
Yeah. But it's the nature of the medium, and it's the nature of Candace's gifts, and it's the nature of Candace's personality to cultivate that kind of parasocial relationship. I have come to realize, though, that not every parasocial relationship is created equal, that there's actually really good things about parasocial relationships. And as an example, and an example on this topic of jobs, I grew up in a small town, and there was a couple in my small town, Sue and Ernie Davis. And Sue Davis was my 6th grade English teacher. And her husband, Ernie Davis, in 4th and 5th grade, he was the principal of the little school that we went to called Stephen F. Austin, which was only 4th and 5th grade, right? A little secondary elementary school. Now, because it's a small town, Ernie Davis had a relationship with my grandparents and had been a coach in the town and a teacher in the town who had my mother and all my aunts and uncles at various times, right? But when I came along, he's in this administrative role. Being principal of a secondary elementary school is basically an administrative role, right? And you might say, well, a coach really invests in students. So it's easy to see that that's a missional job, being a coach. A teacher invests in the lives of students. It's easy to see that that's a missional job. Or maybe not every teacher approaches it as a missional job, but very easy to see how, when it's recognized in a rightly ordered way, that's an incredibly missional role that you have in the world. Less obvious with an administrative role like a principal. And yet I realized while thinking about the nature of parasocial relationships that my entire adult life, I've dreamt that I knew the President of the United States. Every president, from George Bush, from Bill Clinton even before, but my adult life, really, George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. I have a very active kind of dream life, and in my dreams, I know the president. But I always know the president in the same way. I don't know the president because I am important and I know the president. I always know the president because he was my principal when I was in elementary school. And in my dreams, it's literally true. In my dreams, George W. Bush was my principal in elementary school. Barack Obama was my principal in elementary school. And so I had this sort of personal relationship to them, but it was all from when I was a kid. And I have come to realize that actually represents 2 important parasocial relationships. We all have a parasocial relationship with the president because the president is the leader of our country. And we do know him, and he does not know us. But we also don't truly know him, right? We know a version of him that's framed by what he shows us, what he doesn't show us, what the political apparatus around him shows us and doesn't show us, what his adversaries show us and don't show us, how it gets framed by news media and influencers. So we don't really know Donald Trump, but we do know Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't know us at all. He doesn't even know we exist. And so that is a peculiar parasocial relationship, but an important way. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And the president should represent things in our lives, good and bad. We should look to him as an example of things, good and bad. We should have a feeling about him, whereas he necessarily doesn't have a feeling about us. We should pray for him. He couldn't possibly pray for us. He might, a good Christian president might pray for us, lowercase, but he can't pray for you. He doesn't know you exist. And yet you have obligations to be prayerful for him. That's a kind of parasocial relationship that isn't necessarily, in some cases it could be, but it's not necessarily negative. But it also evidences to me that I had a parasocial relationship with Ernie Davis. That Ernie Davis was the president to me when I was a kid. It's the same role. He was a guy who I knew more about him than he knew about me. Now, that ultimately isn't true because it was a small town. And he went to church with my grandparents. I had no understanding of that at the time, though. Or I know now that for 25 years, he came to my wedding, 2 decades later, a decade and a half later, well, 2 decades after he was my principal. And I would see him around. Of course, we know each other. It's a small town, and our lives interacted in these ways. But in a sort of fundamental sense, I knew the principal. There were 100 students. In the school, there were probably 200 students, right? And so it was not it was a one-sided relationship. What I knew about him was only what he presented. And an interesting thing about being a role like the principal is that, like being the president, he represents leadership. He represents stability and a kind of masculine stability. I don't see his flaws. I don't know him in any sort of personal way in that moment in my life in particular. I don't know anything about him in a personal way. And yet he represented this thing, probably in a way kind of, who even knows if he was aware of it, because his job was actually largely administrative. He had very little interaction with the student, with any individual student or with the students more broadly. And yet what an important role. He played such an important role in my life while he barely interacted with me at all, that he actually in a way that only my dreams made clear to me as an adult, he represented the same kind of authority as the President of the United States. He was the highest, the kind of like super authority. Like in a way he was an authority even like over different than, but even like over my father in a weird way, because he wore a suit to work, and people said yes sir to him, and he wasn't my dad. I didn't know anything about him. You know your dad, you know things, So you go, well, that's just one example of how in every part of your life, whatever you're doing, there is mission. Now, who knows? Ernie was a soulful and thoughtful man, is a soulful and thoughtful man.
Does he know anything about all this stuff that you're saying right now? Is this all a revelation to him?
He does now.
He's going to learn a lot. He's going to learn a lot in this episode.
Right, tune in.
He may not at that time have understood. He may have even felt that he had lost some of his mission. Who knows? Because he had been a coach and he'd worked really directly with, he'd been a teacher and a coach. He'd worked really directly with students before. He may have felt in some way like now he making a little more money, have a little more authority, but I don't have that same satisfaction of, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but nevertheless, he modeled something, and not just for me, but for hundreds of.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you might, but it's very easy. I know how human beings are. It's very easy, even hearing that story, to go, well, yeah, but he was the principal of a school. And then you put yourself in a smaller and smaller, specialer and specialer box where what you're doing has no meaning. But my point is, whatever you're doing has meaning.
Yeah. I had
Do it meaningfully.
I had a good friend many years ago, and truly his dream was to be a plumber. He felt kind of embarrassed about it. He felt like it wasn't a real dream, like it wasn't a thing that people wanted to do. And so he always kind of had it over here, and he had a little bit of a fascination with like plumbing, and I don't know anything else about it to describe it. And then at one point he gave himself permission to just like want that. He's like, this is what I want. And he went to whatever trade school or training you have to do, and he became a plumber, and he's a plumber now, and he loves it. He's so happy.
Of course.
Yeah, and you think, it's one of the jobs that you think, you would assume the people in those jobs are like, yeah, well, I'm just a plumber. I don't have a mission, and I couldn't articulate what the mission is for a plumber, but there is some sort of calling that he felt.
My grandmother sells tombstones. My grandmother, I won't say my grandmother's age, because she's a woman, and I've come to learn painfully, through painful experience, that women don't like for you to say their age. My grandmother's not a young woman. She's my grandmother.
Right.
She could have retired 2 decades ago and been on a normal kind of retirement timeline. She still goes to work every single day and sells tombstones.
Wow.
Now, you might think selling tombstones is, first of all, sales. Sales is hard and not something that we often ascribe positive value to. We don't like salespeople. We don't like sales call. That's a thing that we sometimes can denigrate culturally. And we all know that sales is a very hard job. Tombstones, in particular, you just say that you work in tombstones. I've had this experience over the years of saying my family is in the tombstone business, and people almost bristle at it, like, "Oh, what a terrible." My grandmother was put on earth by God to sell tombstones. I'm just telling you this, that my grandmother's ability to work with people who are processing grief, who are processing memories from the past. People, it's not like the movies, somehow in movies, when you go to a funeral, there's already a tombstone, which makes no sense, because we bury people within 2 or 3 days, and tombstones take months. And the truth is, people don't usually even buy one for months or even years after. So sometimes it's people like in active grief. Some people do come in like the next day, and then you're dealing with that. But for a lot of people, they've moved on from thinking about this actively. They've avoided thinking about it for months, and now you're sort of re-exposing them to that. And I'm just telling you that there are very few. I don't know if there's anybody in the world better than my grandmother at this. There are very few people in the league of my grandmother at being able to meet people in those moments and do this thing in their lives that memorializes, in the truest sense, memorializes some of the most important relationships that those people have had in their lives. That's a mission. I've known a lot of people over the years who've worked in the tombstone business, even for my family, for my grandparents, for whom it was not a mission, or for whom who could not see the mission in it. And so their experience of it is nothing like what her experience of it is. They're not doing what God put them on the earth to do, or they're not doing it as God put them on the earth to do it.
Yeah.
How do you know what God put you on the earth to do?
Well, that's what I was going to say is what God put you on the earth to do is the thing that you're doing. Like
Thing
one
with-
way you know that is like
excellence.
Can't not do.
With care and with excellence.
But I think one thing that people have lost in especially the left's ascendancy in culture is the relationship with the employer. It's almost always negative, right? They're like stealing your valuable labor from you, and if only you were free from that, then you'd be able to do some missional job or whatever. No. There is value in your work. Do you know how you know that? Someone is paying you to do it.
That's right.
Like that employer is giving you money and probably health insurance and all the things to do this task because there's someone else on the other side of whatever it is that you're doing that needs that service.
That's right.
Like, and even that, at the most fundamental level, is missional. Like, what are you going to do for that person that you work for, who has taken that risk and made this business or whatever it is, to put it all on the line? And I remember one of my early jobs was I was working at a fairgrounds in a restaurant, and my dad just instilled this in me. He taught work ethic, that it was just a virtue in and of itself. Hard work is great, and if you work with excellence, that's something to be proud of.
For its own sake.
And so, we'd make these tri-tip sandwiches. And, you had to slice the beef and you'd have to go in and tenderize it in the freezer, which was just awful. It's so cold and your hands are just ice and really painful experience. But I thought, I'm going to tenderize this better than anybody else. I'll get through more steaks than anybody else could get through in this amount of time. Everything that I could possibly do, I just thought, I'm going to do this as best as anybody can do it. I was always trying to figure out a faster or better way to do it. And so I got to the point where, of course, you're supposed to weigh the sandwiches on a scale. Because, you got to have the right amount of meat. So you got to have 8 ounces of meat. But that's extra time. And I'm moving through and I'm getting sandwiches. And so I got it down to where I just knew the right amount of meat to put on that sandwich. And the owner would come in every once in a while and he'd kind of get upset and he'd say, that's too much meat. I'd say, no, it's not. he'd say, weigh it and put up there exactly 8 ounces. And, of course, he'd chuckle about it and then he would laugh and he'd say, we're all going to be working for Lewis someday. Just because of that, because it didn't matter whether it was a missional job of trying to change the country. I mean, I was giving people sandwiches at the fair, but I wanted them to have a great sandwich at the fair, and this is what they were paying me to do, and I wanted them to have the best service. If a table was dirty out there, I'd go clean it up. Anything that I could do, I would do it.
Quiet quitting is unchristian.
Yes.
Being bad at your job is unchristian. Hating your boss is unchristian. Whatever is before you, whatever work is before you, there's a thing called the Protestant work ethic. This country, it used to be something that you would openly talk about in public education, in that we knew that part of our success as a nation is the Protestant work ethic. That's what set America apart and made it different than Europe, is that we had the Protestant work ethic, that that the Puritans who originally founded the country believed some version of the actual act of work was an act of worship. And that translated into Protestantism as it was understood in this country more broadly. And it's one of the great losses of the year 2026 is that we don't instill that in our kids, and it hasn't been instilled in a generation of kids. People don't even know about it. If you're quiet quitting, quit. You are stealing money. When an employer pays you, they're taking money that belongs to them. And they're saying, I will take what belongs to me and give it to you in exchange for a service. If you're taking it and not giving them the service, that is an act of theft. If you believe that you can phone it in and get paid, unchristian, fundamentally wrong, unmissional. If you're doing it and patting yourself on the back because you're a great dad, you're not a great dad. You are modeling theft for your children.
And hard work isn't just worship, it's also an act of witness.
Yes.
I before doing all this conservative stuff, I worked at a label factory. They printed on paper and put paper on cans and bottles, and it's the most banal, boring thing that you could imagine. The owner of this label company was a Christian, and if you had asked him what his mission was, he would say, my mission is to glorify God, spread the gospel around the world, and to bless our customers by making the most beautiful labels in the world. And when salespeople or suppliers would come in to visit or meet or try to sell something, he was obnoxious. He would lay hands on them and pray for them, whether they were Christian or not. He would preach the gospel to the Chinese suppliers, and making great labels and printing beautiful art on labels became an avenue for not just making money, but also spreading the gospel, not just stateside, but to Chinese and Japanese suppliers and customers in Canada, and that was eye-opening for me as well. To really, and no matter what it is, the Bible says, whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do all to the glory of God.
Yeah.
You can be a trash collector, and you can find a way to not only do it excellently and take pride in it, but use it as an avenue for witness. People, your work and your attitude is a testament to others, and it opens up opportunities to talk about what people will ask you, because most people are down on their jobs. Why are you so happy? Why do you have such a good attitude? It's an opportunity to talk about them. Talk about why you have this attitude, why you have this hope that others don't have.
Yeah, I think when we started the Daily Wire and grew the Daily Wire and pulling it all the way forward into what we're doing right now, this to me is more important than politics. It's fundamental to what I want to express into the world, and has always been fundamental to what I want to express into the world. That how we conduct ourselves in the pursuit of our life's work, or whatever the tasks in front of us, all the roles of our lives, parenthood, or being a husband, or being a father, or being an employee, or being an employer, that in all of that, we are people who have agency, we have calling, we have responsibility, both for the people in our lives, but also for the labor of our hands. So much of what's wrong with our country now is that we're looking for that external locus of control, that we're looking for someone else who's responsible. And there's this sort of kick the can down the road mentality that permeates, where every problem, everything that's wrong is someone else's fault, but also every solution is someone else's responsibility. And if you want to fix the country, the surest thing that's in your power to do is to fix you. the surest thing that's in your power to do is to live your life modeling the kind of attitude, the kind of perspective, the kind of responsibility, the kind of civic responsibility that you want to see in the world. It's ultimately the only, to the extent that you're capable of any change. I mean, I don't want to get too...
Can you say that in Jordan Peterson's voice real quick? I think...
only poorly.
You do it pretty good, Jordan.
I don't do it bad, Jordan.
People know it's Jordan when you do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
No one has ever not known.
Yes.
Even if I don't tee it up.
That's
I know
right.
exactly what I mean. And because I spent a lot of time with Dr. Peterson over, not a lot of time, but above average amount of time with Dr. Peterson over the years, and because I naturally mirror, I would find that when I talk to anyone, I find that I speak a bit more like them. And so when I would speak to Dr. Peterson, I would become much more Peterson-esque, And I was always...
I can attest.
John can attest. And also because I'm a great admirer of Dr. Peterson, he never assumed the role of mentor in my life, but he is a mentor to me. He's a mentor to millions of people. Yeah.
Talk about a parasocial,
Yes.
a positive parasocial.
A positive parasocial relationship. Very well modeled what a positive parasocial relationship can look like.
We've all had the chance to work with a lot of famous people, and there's always warts, and there's always, some more than others, whatever. What an incredible man.
Oh my goodness.
Jordan Peterson, just how tragic it is that his voice isn't in the movement right now. Obviously how desperately we need it. But just to say, having been behind the scenes like that in those moments, he's so sincere.
So
It was all true. Like that, those kind of interactions that he had, we saw him behind the scenes. We saw him when he was tired. We saw him when and it was just, that man he believed in this mission more than anybody else I've ever seen. He was I'm sure partly what got him is he wanted to save the world.
Talk about a hard worker who is
He gave
doing
everything.
whatever it,
He just
whatever
gave
it
everything
takes.
all the time, and probably too much. And you, if anything, you'd want to pull him back. Like you just say, like, just don't, But I think he just felt that weight. He felt the constant pressure, and with the platform and the gifts that he'd been given, that he had to do something great with it. But
when people denigrate Jordan Peterson online, and we all know the angles of attack that people use. And some of them are probably even founded. I won't say well-founded, but founded. Jordan Peterson's a man. He has the weaknesses of any man. He has the flaws of any man. He's a fully formed human being. So of course there are things you can pick out and pick on. But when people do it online more than with anyone else, when they're like, oh, that guy, this, that, I'm like, you can't. What you were holding those negative statements, you were holding up against, like, a great man, a man who cared more about what was right and actually doing what was right than just about any person I've ever engaged with, and certainly more than any successful, famous person whom I've ever dealt with. And that makes carrying around the flaws of a man all the harder, because his flaws to himself were always in sharp relief. I remember early in our relationship with Jordan, we had a somewhat existential difference of opinion about a term in our contract with him. And I say existential because it is the kind of thing that very easily could have been a lawsuit, could have very easily been the unraveling of the relationship. It was a fundamental and consequential disagreement. And I argued it with his team, and then he reached out. And we didn't have much of a relationship at the time. And then he reached out and asked if we could talk. And I thought, well, I know exactly how this conversation is going to go. This is the conversation where the famous guy puts you in your place and shows you his muscles, because they got him, right? The audience is going to be on their side, even if they're wrong. They have resources with which to combat you. They have it can be a very challenging thing to navigate. I was dreading getting on this call, but okay, I get on a FaceTime call with him, and the first thing he said was, "I really want to understand your perspective here." Basically lay it out for me, and I laid it out for him, and he instantly understood my perspective. Instantly, because he's very intelligent, and very soulful, and to your point, very sincere.
yes,
He instantly saw my perspective, he didn't let on whether he agreed with my perspective or not, because it was secondary. The thing that was primary was, how are we going to resolve the conflict? And whether we agree or not isn't really germane to how we resolve the conflict. And his answer to how we were going to resolve the conflict was that he was going to push pause on the conflict, not stop. He was going to push pause on the conflict, and he wanted us to have these calls regularly. And I thought that he meant calls to continue discussing the conflict. Like, I'm going to pump the brakes. We'll get back on the phone every 3 weeks or whatever it was, and we'll slowly talk it out. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting strategy, because that's kind of a de-emphasize, de-escalate, but also wear you down over time kind of approach, right? So a few weeks later, I got on the next call, and I had some more facts and some more arguments about the terms, and the disagreement never came up. He asked me questions about the business. He told me concerns that he had, kind of, interacting, normal stuff, interacting with my team. Here's some things could we work on? Hey, how would you feel about this? What if I did this and then you did that were on totally different topics? Asked sincere questions. And I got off that call and thought, well, what an interesting technique. Now he's distracting me or whatever, right?
What's he up to?
What's he up to? Then I got 3 or 4 of these calls under my belt, and I realized, oh no, this isn't a strategy to get what he wants out of this negotiation that we're in. This is a strategy to have the kind of relationship that is able to weather the disagreements. And what he's saying is, hey, we actually can't solve this right now in any constructive way because we lack the fundamental relationship in order to do it. And probably if we had the fundamental trust that comes from shared mission, shared experience, shared time, shared relationship, I don't know what the answer to this is, but probably that's an answer that just occurs to the people who have that kind of built-in, trust. I say all of that only to say how remarkable it is. I've never seen anyone navigate so deliberately that kind of a challenge, and really not in a way that, I don't want to say he's not self-serving in any way. He's a human being, and he needs to pursue his interests, and he does pursue his interests.
And he says that he's self-serving.
And he says that he's self-serving. He's open about pursuing his interests.
That's right.
So I don't want to say that no part of this was aimed at getting what he wanted out of the conversation. On some level, of course it was. But it was really so much more than that, so much bigger than that. And is yet another reason why when people denigrate him now, when we need his voice so badly, I'm just like, a true great man has been sidelined in this conversation. And when we first started talking about doing this show, it was so obvious to us that Jordan being out of the conversation right now, and Dennis Prager being out of the conversation right now, made us feel all the more that it was important for us to get into the conversation, not because in any way we could replace either of those two great men, or Charlie, who's also obviously, his voice is so badly missing from the conversation. Those are men with different gifts, different perspectives, different audience, different levels of success. No one can replace what any one of them, certainly no one can replace what the 3 of them. And yet, because of their not being in the conversation, there felt like there was more responsibility to, well, then what are we going to do to replace them, but more like, what are the rest of us going to do? If you ever thought this was somebody else's responsibility because those great men were around, those great men are now not around. Yeah. And so it's a little bit maybe like Moneyball. Like, those were guys who could knock it out of the park. My claim about the Jeremy Boring Show is not that we're going to knock it out of the park. It's just that maybe we'll get on base. And maybe a few other guys will come into the conversation who can get on base. And maybe between all of us, we can carry a little bit of the burden of what's now missing from the conversation.
I mean, but we're not trying for a home run.
Some home runs would be nice.
I like home runs.
Some home runs would be nice.
Maybe get the bases loaded first.
I did want to say, we obviously have big aspirations. It's just the kind of people we are. So we're not anywhere close to where we want to be.
Yeah.
But the reception to the show has been incredible. Like really, I mean, sometimes my favorite thing, which, this could become a trap, is to read the comments. And it's not just like, oh, it's a great show. We love, the depth and the weight of the comments that people are leaving, the impression it's making on them is the kind of thing that makes you want to be successful, not just for, its own sake, but because you see, okay, this is actually seems to be helping people.
Yes.
The
Yes.
thing we hear frequently is this is giving language to problems people were seeing but didn't know how to understand or how to articulate. And I think that's something we all feel really strongly about and feel that Jeremy is particularly gifted at. So to see that it's resonating in that way makes us want to grow even more.
Yeah.
And I did think it'd be fun tonight if we took some questions from the audience, because we have some.
That's a great idea. We should take questions from the audience. If people want to get questions in, what should they do? If somebody's watching live,
Okay, put them in the chat,
the YouTube chat.
or you can go to the community post. There's a post on the community post section, and you can drop it in there. But I pulled some. We have a few from earlier. So
I'll say one thing while you're pulling that up, to agree with you about the audience, and the comments are incredibly encouraging. Every subscriber is encouraging because we started out at 0. Like to go from Daily Wire to a brand new show on a brand new channel. I mean, you are shouting into the void, you know.
It actually feels humiliating in a way that's hard for people to appreciate. But like,
yes,
the only time I was really on camera was when we were doing something big, a town hall or Jeremy's Razors commercial or Backstage. And 1 million people listened to every episode of Backstage.
you hosted election night. We had 12 million viewers on election night. Wow. So like we're used to a big audience, but also, you know, this message is also a little bit different. I think it's relevant for right now. But that's of course also a risk. You're putting that out there and you don't know who's going to respond or who's going to follow. Yeah. And there's a bit of a feeling of isolation. And so every subscriber also feels like they're on the team.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like there are people who agree with us. They care about this message. They want to see this advanced.
They're not alone.
They're not alone,
Yeah.
and we're not alone. We're not alone
right.
because you know, we're just here with a few of us every day, writing all this, and you just you put it out into the world, and you hope to get a response like that. And when you do, it means the world. It really does. It's kind of like, you know, when your wife says, "Go get him." When the audience says back to you, like, "Yes," like it really does mean a tremendous amount. So also please like and subscribe.
Yeah, right. Tell your friends, share all the episodes.
I believe the term is smash that like button.
Yeah.
Smash that like button. I think there's supposed to be someone. We don't have that. Whatever is supposed to be on the screen.
It's never where the person points, by the way.
Ring the bell, whatever.
Click on that like button, smash that bell. I don't know.
Like, yeah. Can't they fix that in post-production?
We don't have that team.
We're live.
Okay, the first question that we got today is from, I'm not going to read the username because it's hard to read. Jeremy, I'm taken aback at how well you construct your thoughts and stack them with so much clarity. The truth is so refreshing this time. Question, with both sides of politics becoming woke / crazy / anti-Semitic / blinded / hysterical, etc., where does this pattern go? Does the upside down correct itself, or does it end with everyone devouring themselves? This pattern has no doubt occurred before, just not on such a large scale. That's a great question.
Well, first I want to say thank you to the first part about how we construct our thoughts. And I want to say that one thing that has kept me from doing a podcast all these years, I mean, the number one thing that kept me from doing a podcast all these years is that I've been highly occupied with and satisfied by the creative act of building and running the company. I built and ran the Daily Wire for 10 years. There was no room for any other thing. But there were these moments, you know, to bring up Jordan Peterson again, I remember when we were doing press for Lady Ballers, Alyssa, I believe it was you who said, well, we should see if Jordan would have you on to talk about, not just to talk about Lady Ballers, but in promotion for Lady Ballers. And I said, I don't want to go on Jordan's show.
Yeah, you were weirdly, I don't want to say nervous, but you were kind of dismissive of yourself. You said, you know, Ben and Michael, they know how to have those conversations. They do this every day. That's not me. I'm not in front of the camera. And I don't know if John was with me at the time, but when you would say things like that, it was very puzzling because we just in interpersonal conversations with you had a very different experience. And it seemed obvious to us, oh, no, I think you would have a great conversation and actually like an exceptionally great conversation.
But I've come to realize that one reason that I was nervous about, because I would go on some kinds of shows, one reason I was very nervous to go on Jordan's podcast or certain other podcasts of a certain kind of thoughtfulness is because there is a skill that people like Ben and Michael and others have that I don't have. It's actually, I don't even know if it's a skill. I think it may be innate. It's an innate kind of intelligence that allows them to think incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
Incredibly quickly. And I'm not that guy. I'm not a fact memorizer. Ben can read a paper or a top sheet of a legal contract or something. He can retain it almost like photographically. And that's an amazing innate intellectual capability. I don't have that. To the extent that we are properly ordering our thoughts, or I think in the question they said stacking them. It's because I give myself the time to. I'm a slow speaker. I don't do well on going on Fox News hits. Because a Fox News hit, you're supposed to be pithy. I think, what is it that Bill O'Reilly used to say? You know,
keep it pithy.
Keep it pithy. Yeah. Because that is the nature of that medium. You have to be question, answer, question, answer. The answer has to be sharp. It has to be clippable. That skill or innate ability, I certainly don't have. One thing I love about this medium is that it allows me to give myself a minute to form a thought and to form an answer. But I actually know that that doesn't make great TV. But I think that it can actually work in podcasting. As to the second, yes, both sides are in trouble. Where does it end? Well, we don't know where it ends. When I say that we should resist the forces of despair, when I say that we should resist the black pill, when I say that we should resist the sort of easy catharsis of being overly populist in our politics, it's not because I'm certain that this is going to work out. We may have every cause for despair if things don't change. Things may go very badly indeed. Societies do collapse. Countries do collapse. Totalitarianism does emerge. Tyranny does emerge. Things happen that are so terrible that they're almost farcical for us to even consider. Our experience is so removed from those experiences. We don't think about the Great Terror. We don't think about purges, but those happen, and they've happened all throughout civilization. It could be that bad. I say resist despair for a variety of reasons, not because that isn't possible, but because it isn't assured. Because even if it were assured, despair wouldn't be a reasonable tool to bring to bear against it. And since it's not assured, despair is an even less reasonable tool to bring to bear against it. And in fact, despair almost hastens or assures that it will occur, because despair prevents you from taking the actions that are necessary to make it stop. When you're depressed, you don't do. When you're in despair, you don't do. When you're a victim, you deny yourself agency. You look for that external locus of control instead of looking for the internal locus of control, instead of doing and constructing and building. At the end of the day, it does all collapse as soon as everybody lets it. Don't let it. Don't be one of the everybody who's trying to let it. It's remarkable how few people it actually takes to make a difference in the world. If you look back at some of the worst moments in history, it's amazing how few people actually prevented calamity. There was a moment in the Cold War where the only reason that Russia didn't engage in a full nuclear counterstrike against what they believed was an incoming first strike by American nuclear ballistic missiles is because one single man in Russia decided not to do what he was ordered to do. The circumstances did not make sense to him. The data that was coming in, he could see the data. America had launched its missiles, but it made no sense that that would be true under the circumstances that were true at the time. And so he didn't do the thing that the book said he should do. And he's not only one of the great heroes of the 20th century, he's one of the great heroes of human history. Wow. One human being prevented what would have been the largest destruction of human life in all of human history, probably all of them combined. One guy. It doesn't take many of us. And so, how many times in the Bible are we told, fear not? Lift up now thine eyes throughout the book of Genesis. Like, we're not called to despair. We are called to not despair. And we are called to act in faith. And I think it's not that acting in faith is guaranteed to work, because God didn't promise us that America is going to continue or that we're not going to go through hard times. There won't be another civil war. The economy won't collapse. It won't all give way to tyranny. Plenty of Christians live in places where there is tyranny. Plenty of Christians have lived through civil wars. Plenty of, any of that could befall us. Any of those fates could befall us. And yet we're still called to the same thing. Fear not, trust God, And part of trusting God is to believe that you have the freedom to take action, even if the action isn't perfect, even if you're not right. You have freedom to act. So act. I'll tell this story that I believe I've told before, but when I was, I think still probably 19 years old, I had the opportunity to be a part of a production at the National Cowboy Poetry gathering in Elko, Nevada.
Do we have videos of that?
Yeah, well, I was not a performer. I was in a technical role, but part of my job was to transport a windmill from West Texas to Elko. And to get to Elko, you go up the loneliest, they call it the loneliest highway in the world, I think, the road between Las Vegas and Elko, Nevada. And as I'm on that drive, I still live at home with my parents. I'm an adult, but I still live at home. And I had given blood. I worked at a radio station. I was a disc jockey at the time, and we did a Christmas blood drive every year. So I'd given blood as part of the blood drive. And now here I am, whatever number of weeks later, and I'm hauling this U-Haul, or hauling this windmill up the loneliest highway in America. And I had a cell phone. Nobody in my family had a cell phone, but I was always interested in technology and had a cell phone I couldn't afford. And my mother chooses, this is back when there were things like roaming. The loneliest highway in America, you're roaming.
Oh, yeah.
There's no G on the end of it. It's just you're roaming apostrophe. And my mom calls me on my roaming minutes and says, she's beside herself upset. She says, I just opened a letter that says you have AIDS. And I said, what? She said, there was a letter from the blood bank. It said it was addressed to you, but it said it was urgent. And I opened it. I said, you opened my mail? Why are you opening my mail? I'm a grown adult. Well, it said urgent. I opened it, and it says you have AIDS. And I said, well, okay, read to me what it says. And it said, and these words will be people in the audience will immediately know what these words mean. My mom didn't know what these words meant at the time. I didn't know what the words meant at the time. The internet barely existed to look it up at the time. In fact, it never once occurred to me at that time to look this up on the internet. That's how different the world was back then. But it said there's an automatic screening of the results when you give blood, according to whatever law, and you have had a false positive for an antibody linked to the AIDS virus, and you're banned from giving blood. You can't give blood, and you have to come in for an urgent follow-up meeting. Well, it says right there, you're positive for an antibody related to HIV, right? I mean, that's what it says. Well, it says false positive. It says positive. Well, I don't think it said false positive. What I think it said is you tested positive for this antibody. But if you read a little deeper into the letter, there's like an antigen and an antibody. They test for both. I don't remember the exact details, right? But it was very scary. And also you have to go back in time to 1998 or whatever, when AIDS was like the scariest thing that existed. I mean, it's just AIDS was a thing. You didn't know anybody who had AIDS if you lived in a small town in West Texas. And AIDS was just a thing you got from kissing girls and then you died, which I think is what we actually thought when I was in school, like
from not washing your hands in the bathroom.
Yeah, the myth of heterosexual AIDS. And it was a complete death sentence. So I get off of this call. My mom's upset and I'm upset, and I get off this call, and it's like, well, what am I going to do? I had a buddy traveling with me, and it's like, well, what do we do? Do we go back right now and get this test? It's like, well, if we turn this truck around, here's a bunch of things that I know will happen. The windmill will not get to Elko, Nevada. That means the cast will not have the only major set piece that they have to have in order to deliver the show. I'll have let down the people with whom I work and who are kind of mentors to me and are important to me and have given me this opportunity. I will have failed at my job. And I will either have AIDS or not have AIDS. Like, I either have it right now, in which case being worried about it does nothing for me, or I don't have AIDS right now, in which case panicking about it is only going to cause me to either take the wrong immoral action and put my fear first and let all these real life people to whom I have a commitment down, or ruin the next 5 days that I have to be on this task before I can turn around and go home in a responsible way and do this. Either way, the only thing that I think I can't do right now is have fear. I have got to, it was like a moment of spiritual I think I was actually in prayer even when it came to, when this thought hit me. So it really was like a true gift from God just to say, you've got AIDS or you don't. The only question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to act out of fear and do the wrong thing? Or are you going to act out of fear and be crushed? That won't change whether or not you have it or don't have it. And so then I felt this true peace from God to just go through with my commitments. And I went to Elko and heard a bunch of great cowboy poetry. And we put on the play, and it was very successful. And I drove home. I didn't even wake up early the next morning and go to the blood bank. I had it rightly ordered in my mind. I had good perspective. And in reasonable time, I went up to the blood bank and I said, this says I have AIDS. And they said, no, it says you tested positive. I said, yeah, it says I tested positive for HIV. No, you tested positive for an antibody or an antigen or whatever. It's almost always a false positive. Did you read down at the bottom? It says it's almost always a false positive. So what's a false positive? It's got the word positive. I didn't know what a false positive was. And she said, she said, I can just tell you you don't have it. I don't even need to do a follow-up test. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, if you had it, you would have the antibody, not just the antigen. The antigen can be caused from other viruses. Maybe you had the flu when you gave blood, and it looks the same to the test. But in order for it to be a true positive, you would have the antigen and the antibody. I said, then why the hell do you send out a letter that says urgent, you can't give blood anymore, come have a follow-up test? And she said, oh, we're required by the government because before they fully understood it, there was a nationwide scare about getting it from blood transfusions. Some people did get it from blood transfusions. I mean, that's a real thing that happened, but it was in a very small minority of cases. So like all panics, there was some little sliver of truth, and then it turns into this giant. She said, and so some law got passed, and now this is what we're required to send out. She said, but I know you don't have it, and I'll give you a follow-up test, and then I'll make it, you won't even have the antigen because now it's been a week later or 3 weeks later or whatever it was. By the way, 2 years later on 9/11, though, I still couldn't give blood. The way the law was written at that time, once you had this test, you were out forever. You could never give blood again, even though they knew you didn't have it. Even though there's a follow-up test, they knew you didn't have it. Just to show that government is so inefficient. Government always paints with this broad brush. Government always does the wrong thing. But that has stuck with me my whole life. It's a long answer to the question, but it has stuck with me my whole life, the piece of just realizing that if a thing is true, or not true, you being in despair, you being in panic, you living in fear does nothing to change that. And probably most of the time, the thing you most fear isn't true. Or unlike the AIDS test, the HIV test, most of the time you still do have some agency, not only for how you're going to react to the bad thing, but how you're going to mitigate against the bad thing through your actions. So I don't know the future. I'm not a prophet. I know for a fact that if you live your life like you have free will, and if you live your life like you have agency, and you live your life like you have a mission, and you rightly order your priorities to stay on that mission, then you are a part of what's good in the world. Imperfect. Our friend Laurel would make me say none are good, and she's right. But you're at least a part of whatever is good in the world, whatever leans toward good in the world. And the outcomes are in God's hands anyway. So be that thing, don't be the other thing.
Headed Mike asks, what are your thoughts on husband-wife situations where the wife feels like she has a clear vision or calling that isn't on the same timeline as her husband's? I love this question.
Oh man, this is a great question.
This is a great question.
It is a great question.
I too would like to hear the answer to this.
One of the privileges I've had in my life is that I was a lay pastor for 15 some years or something in LA. And one of the beautiful things that accompanies that is that you have the opportunity to officiate the weddings of many of your friends, many of the people you care about. I've officiated a couple dozen weddings, certainly, of people whom I care about. And I always would do premarital counseling for them, 3 sessions. I've even done premarital counseling for people whom I didn't officiate their weddings, but people who were in that community, or even employees at the Daily Wire, or former employees at the Daily Wire who weren't even in the Christian tradition, but asked me if I knew that this was a thing I had done and had a trust and wanted to hear some of that wisdom, which had been accumulated through years of engaging with couples and years of, now one of the negative things that happens when you're in that role is that you also have to counsel people in bad times when their marriages are in trouble, sometimes even when their marriages fail. I would be in counseling with the husband and the wife together and separately, and then that informs your premarital counseling as well. And one of the things that I would often say when doing premarital counseling is the biblical metaphor is very clear that the head of the family is the husband, just as the head of the church is Christ. And so you don't have to like that. You, as a pastor whom I really learned a lot from, never knew personally, but really learned a lot from, I used to say, you can have any kind of marriage you want. I'm not your boss. You want to have an open marriage, you can have an open marriage. You want to have a secular, you can have a secular marriage. You want to have that's your business. I can't give you any advice for how to navigate any of that. If we're talking about Christian marriage, well, I can point you to some great truth about Christian marriage. The great truth of Christian marriage is that the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church. And what does Christ give to the church? Well, ultimately, Christ presents the church, his bride, unto himself as holy and unblemished. And the verse goes on to say that, by the way, in Ephesians. Present her unto yourself as holy and unblemished. Your wife is not holy, and she is not unblemished, and neither is the church in any way that we would measure. But Christ presents us unto himself as though we were. That is the ultimate act of mercy that's encompassed in the unmerited favor, which is the grace that God extends to us through Christ. And so Christ gives headship to the church. That's right there in the metaphor. Christ is the leader of the church. That's right there in the metaphor. And Christ treats the church as though it's holy and unblemished and sanctified, even though those things aren't demonstrably true. And so what does the husband bring to the marriage? Headship, leadership, and grace, mercy. And what does the church give to Christ? Well, the church gives to Christ worship, which means, again, to quote this pastor whom I was really inspired by, worship means worthship, that you ascribe to the thing value. That's ultimately what worship means. The role of the wife is to ascribe value to the husband. And it's right there in the verse, submission. But what does submission mean? It means letting him be the leader. Now, wives often get angry about these verses. Modern wives get angry about these verses because it seems like the man gets the good part of the job to be in charge, and the woman gets the bad part of the job, which is to submit. And to worship, I'm supposed to worship some man. Well, I don't want to break this to you, but the metaphor is just a metaphor. It's a metaphor for your relationship with Christ, who is a man, and you are supposed to worship him. So yes, you are supposed to worship some man. I hate to break that to you. If you object to the idea of worshiping some man, then this whole metaphor is not going to work for you. We're talking about something other than Christian marriage. You know who else is supposed to worship some man? Men. Because the metaphor is just a metaphor. We're the church. We are the feminine in the relationship with God. We're the bride in the relationship with God. We learn how to be, a man learns how to be a good member of the church by seeing his wife, in part by seeing his wife model being a good wife to him. And a wife learns to submit to Christ in a way by seeing her husband model good headship to her. Imperfect, in the same way that God calls himself a father, but your father wasn't always great. God calls himself a husband, but your husband isn't always great. And yet, that is the context that God gives us for having to even being able to begin to understand him, because we can't understand God in any absolute or total sense. So these are things, graces that God has given us to understand him at all. So women are sometimes offended by this. I have to submit and he gets to lead. But as I often say, this is like Jeremy 101 Jeremy philosophy here. Husbands don't want to lead. Husbands don't want to be in charge. Yeah. You know, there's no term in the English language for woman cave. There's only man cave. Men want to be left alone. Men don't want responsibility. Men want to unplug, turn off, hide away, turn on a video game, not have responsibility. Women want responsibility. They want to be in charge. They're probably in some ways have a more natural aptitude toward leadership, which is why they have all those colored highlighters and all those colored note tabs that they put on everything, and they organize everything, and they want to lead the family. And what God is saying in the metaphor, what's that?
I think it's more about control than leadership.
They want control.
Yeah.
And what God is saying, you both have to give up something that's fundamental to your nature and step into a thing that isn't what you were naturally made for, but is a thing that you have supernaturally submitted to. Men, you don't get to just be responsible for yourself. You have to do the thing that's antithetical to your fleshly nature and become responsible for something. And the thing you're going to become responsible for doesn't always deserve it. It doesn't deserve the sacrifices that you make on its behalf. So you're also going to have to love it to the point of self-sacrifice and present it unto yourself as holy and unblemished. And wives, you're going to have to trust your husbands, which is ultimately what submission means. It means trust. You're going to have to trust your husband, not because he's trustworthy. In fact, the mystery of marriage is that you don't trust your husband because he's trustworthy. Your husband becomes trustworthy in reaction to your trust. And you don't love your wife because she's lovable. Your wife becomes lovable in reaction to your love. You still only have power over yourself if you have power over yourself. Even that is a grace of submission to God, because the things we don't want to do, we do. And so in that way, we come to understand that by being a good husband, you give your wife the opportunity to be a good wife. And by being a good wife, you give your husband an opportunity to be a good husband. You are not, if you say, I'll become a good wife when my husband's a good husband, you'll never have a good husband. And if you say the same thing, I'll be a good husband when I have a good wife, you'll never have a good wife. And when people see a good marriage, when people see, I'll pick on John and Sarah have an admirable marriage and an admirable relationship with their children. And when people see that modeled in the world, they will often say things like, John, I know you've heard this 100 times, which is, man, you just got lucky because you married Sarah. And it's like, what a cop-out.
Yeah.
What a cop-out, because Sarah sucks like everybody sucks, and John sucks like everybody sucks.
Yeah.
And the reason that Sarah is a very good wife and John is a very good husband, not because they got lucky and married a good husband and married a good wife, but because they have both approached marriage trying to honor God by seeing their marriage as a mission and approaching with excellence and humility the task that's been given to them. John leads even when he doesn't want to. Sarah submits even when she entrusts, even when she doesn't want to. And the result is that John becomes more trustworthy and Sarah becomes more lovable. And then from the outside, it looks like they both just got lucky. And this just worked. And if you wouldn't be able to handle my wife. If you knew how bad my wife is, it's like, no. Yes, I got a good wife. Jeremy Boring got a great wife. What's great about my wife is that she trusts me when I'm untrustworthy. And whatever I bring to our marriage is that I love her when she's unlovable. And somehow in the mystery of marriage, those two things become a lovable wife and a trustworthy husband. And so in premarital counseling, I would always say to the wife, to the bride, she's not a wife yet, I would always say, and this is a very LA-centric answer, but I would always say, now imagine, we were in the San Fernando Valley, we were in Sherman Oaks, Studio City. I would say, imagine that you need to get over the hill to go to El Compadre. And you want to take the 101, get off at Highland, zip over to Sunset, hook a right, and go to El Compadre. But your husband wants to go over the canyon, hook a left. Which way is right? And the wife would always say, it's so funny you bring this up. Men always want to take the canyon. They always say the canyon's going to be faster. And it's like 1 in 5 times it actually is. But the other 4 out of 5 times, the freeway just is faster. So we should take the freeway. And I said, well, you failed the test. The answer is the husband sets the direction of the family. And it doesn't matter how fast you get to El Compadre. It doesn't matter if you're right. You're 10 minutes later getting to El Compadre, so what? You're 10 minutes faster getting to El Compadre, so what? The question of marriage isn't how fast do you get to El Compadre. Efficiency isn't the fundamental requirement of marriage. The fundamental requirement of marriage is that husband's husband, and wives' wife. Does that mean you don't tell your husband, hey, literally 4 out of 5 times studies prove that the freeway is faster? No, you should definitely tell him that. And a good husband should definitely listen to his wife, heed her counsel. Men and women attain through the process of living a lot of good information that the other one doesn't have, obviously, but also a lot of hard-earned wisdom. that the other one doesn't have. My wife imparts wisdom to me all the time that I wouldn't have had without her. Sometimes I'm gracious and receive that wisdom unearned. Other times I'm an asshole and I don't receive it and I have to go learn it the hard way for myself. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this by any stretch of the imagination. What I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the question of what matters in a marriage is who sets the direction. The husband sets the direction, even if he's wrong. I might go a step further and say, especially if he's wrong, because that's when it costs you something. I had a friend, I won't name her because I love her. I love her to this day. She's wonderful. But I had a friend who one time said in one of these conversations, well, we were all unmarried when she said this. And she was kind of a brash gal. And she said, well, I'll trust my husband when he's right. And I said, well, that's not trust. That's not trust. Your husband's going to become right over time as you trust him. You're going to navigate all these problems more completely as you trust him. And so if a wife has a sense of the mission of her family and the husband doesn't have a sense of the mission of the family, that happens all the time. You know, I'm not a trad. I don't want to live in the 1950s. I don't believe the 1950s were better than now. The 1950s were way worse than now in some ways and better than now in some other ways. Had their own problems. Every generation has its own problems. I don't object to women working outside the home. My wife had a wonderful career. She was very good at her job and found fulfillment in her job. It's interesting to me because the way that she found fulfillment in her job is very different than the way me or the men in my life find fulfillment. It's not the same. Men and women are different. But I wouldn't denigrate her career at all. She had an amazing career. She was at a TV network for over 20 years, which is completely unheard of, and came from being a temp assistant to being in charge of programming over 9 networks. I mean, it's a remarkable journey that she took. I'm proud of her for it. And I was the beneficiary. She made more money than me for a lot of the years early in our marriage. We were decidedly middle class, you know, like we didn't have a ton of money, but she made more of it than I did for sure. And then there was a moment where that stopped being true. And there's a moment where she stopped working to focus her attentions on our daughter. So I'm not trying to offer up the man is always right, on the contrary, or that the woman doesn't have wisdom, she does, doesn't have knowledge, she does, doesn't have certain leadership responsibilities. There are ways in which a wife has leadership responsibilities even, of course that's true, but she's not the leader of the house, not the leader of the family, she's not the leader of the marriage. And so if you have a sense of mission and your husband doesn't have a sense of mission, your job is to win him over without saying a word. Your job is to, through your trust in him, through your role as his helpmate, through your role as his wife, which is a true role, to win him. And sometimes that means telling him he's wrong. I'm not saying that a wife shouldn't tell her husband when he's wrong. Sometimes your husband's wrong. Sometimes it's even an extraordinary circumstance and the husband needs to be rebuked by the wife, although that's a fairly extraordinary circumstance. That's an extraordinary circumstance. But quite often he needs to be offered kinds of correction from his wife. They're different than the kinds of correction he would get from a buddy or from a boss or from a coach or from a colonel. They have to be handled in the way that they can come from a wife. And part of the wisdom of becoming a good wife is learning how to expose your husband to that in a way that still honors his headship over the family. You should help him to see, sometimes a wife can see her husband's mission when he can't because our eyes look out. Sometimes I can't see what's true about me. I mean, it's a silly example, but you guys knew that I would do a fine job on the Jordan Peterson podcast, and I didn't. I was very insecure about it. And you helped me to find security to go do that. Sometimes a wife has to help her husband find that in a way that still honors his headship, in a way that still shows trust to him.
And nothing will make a man stand up straight, gather his strength, and say to himself, okay, don't F it up. Like a woman saying, okay, I trust you. Like those words, like that will make you want to be a trustworthy man, to your point.
And there's also a vision and a mission that is outside of you, right?
Yes.
There is one that already exists. So it's not like every woman and man needs to go find their vision and their mission for their marriage. It's what you've been talking about this entire time, which is a marriage is a picture of Christ and the church.
That's right.
So are you a good picture or are you a bad picture?
Yeah.
Like that's the opportunity that you have in the marriage is to image forth that relationship and how you handle it. So fundamentally, the point is that's the woman's role in that relationship and how she images forth that. That's declared right there. So if you think that your vision and mission is better than your husband's and that puts you in this role, well, you've already broken the thing that Christ said was the vision and the mission for the marriage. Right. So obey that first, like submit to that aspect, both of you, the husband and the wife, which is outside of you, it's ahead of you, it's above you, it's in eternity, and it's in Christ that you find that.
I heard this testimony at a church I went to probably a decade ago, and it was this husband and wife, and the husband had this incredible career. He was an executive at like Disney and all sorts of huge companies like that, successful financially and otherwise. And his wife, she was from like Oklahoma or something. She missed her family. And I don't remember if she vocalized it or if he just knew, but there was this tension in their relationship or in their marriage where she just always missed her family and wished that she could live near them. But because of his job, they couldn't do that. And then at one point, he felt like the Lord told him, for a season, you actually need to follow where your wife wants to go. If she wants to go to Oklahoma, that's where you guys have got to go. And that was very difficult for him because it meant he'd have to leave his job, and he wrestled with it, whatever. Long story short, he said, okay, Lord, we'll do this, and told her we're going to move to Oklahoma, and she's over the moon. She's so happy. She's the happiest she's ever been. They go to Oklahoma. They live there. He ends up meeting this guy there, and long story short, they start a company that they end up selling for $2 billion, and it's the most success he ever had in his career.
Yeah, $2 billion.
Yeah, and so right.
It's hard to top.
Way better than his $1 billion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, better than $1 billion. Yeah, fair. Yeah, yes. But it just always struck me because obviously, they had a dynamic in their relationship where they were a Christian marriage and all of that, and he felt the Lord call him to do this thing that was different than what he would have done. And
well, this is an important point about headship too. Being the leader of your family, being the head of your household, being the head of the marriage, not only doesn't mean always getting what you want, it very rarely means getting what you want.
Yes.
And this is a thing that I think women who bristle at the idea of submitting to their husband are fundamentally misunderstanding. And it's a thing that young men, particularly in the sort of manosphere space that we see so prominent right now, misunderstand as well about the language of that verse. A man who lords over his wife is not modeling Christ-like headship. Yeah. A man who demands that he get what he wants all the time is a tyrant. Yeah. That's all that is. Yeah. And he's going to have an unsuccessful marriage, and he's going to have an unsuccessful life, and he's not good. He's bad. Christ is good. So in that way, you're not modeling Christ in your marriage at all. What did Christ actually do in his role as head of the church? Well, he died. Yeah. He literally died. Why? To present us unto himself as holy and unblemished. That's the cost. The cost of being the head of the family in a Christ-like way, which of course we fall woefully short of. The metaphor is only a metaphor. It's to love and sacrifice to the point of sacrificing even yourself. So if you can't say, well, I'd be willing to die for my wife, but I'm never willing to let her have things the way she wants them to be. I'm never willing to prioritize her needs over my own needs. I'm never willing to prioritize even her wants over my own wants. Well, first of all, then you're lying to yourself about the fact that you're willing to die for your wife. You're not willing to live for your wife. Yeah. You're not willing to live for your family. And so, part of what, to a young man, if a young man were asking this question, I would say part of the challenge of being a husband and learning to be a husband is learning, when is it appropriate to get what I want? The answer is actually kind of rarely. When's it appropriate to give my wife what she wants? The answer to that is also kind of rarely. The fundamental question is, what is right? Mm-hmm. What is right for my family? Which is why to the wife I say, you take the canyon, because your husband says that's the direction we're going to go, is the canyon. And you don't concern yourself with the question of efficiency. How fast do you get to El Compadre over the hill 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes later? To the husband, my advice is slightly different. To the husband, I say, you may like taking the canyon. You may not like driving on the highway. Your wife is giving you counsel. What's correct? Your job is to listen to counsel when you hear it. Now, at the end of the day, it's your job to make a decision and lead. And you may make the decision that she doesn't want, in which case you've made the decision. That's which way you go. But your preference or your priors aren't actually the thing that should be driving this conversation. you should be looking for wisdom. You should be looking to do the right thing. And your wife quite often is right. Or sometimes there isn't a question of right and wrong, and sometimes it is a preference question. And part of navigating any successful relationship is that sometimes your preference needs to win out, and sometimes her preference needs to win out. Sometimes it doesn't matter whether or not you get to go eat Mexican food at all, much less which route you get to take. Sometimes you take the freeway.
It's a big sacrifice.
It's a big sacrifice.
For Jeremy especially, not eating Mexican food. It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. So it isn't, it's about leading your family in what is right, which is very rarely about what you want. I mean, in most points where a decision has to be made between your wife's point of view and your point of view, the answer is actually kind of neither. The answer is, we're both kind of coming from a question of preference, and we should. It's not so true when it's which way do we take to get to El Compadre, but when you're trying to talk about the real things that you lead in your marriage about, I mean, a lot of the answers to questions are never fully known, and they're a long way from your preferences. And so that's where it is a conversation in a marriage, and it is a working out prayerfully and thoughtfully, and sometimes there is even conflict, a constructive kind of conflict that can emerge out of that to try to. But ultimately, it is the husband's job to decide, and freedom in Christ is that sometimes he just has to have the freedom to know that sometimes his decisions will be wrong, and he has to make them.
The decider in chief.
Yeah.
He's the decider in chief.
We got through 2 questions.
Yeah.
Whoever asked that question,
we're going to take 3 more questions, even if it kills us.
One
Okay.
more comment that I found that I thought
I
was
think she got her money's worth, though.
Yeah, right.
Someone said Jasper is moving on the couch. She says, he's a real dog. Like, I thought maybe he was stuffed because he just sits there so much.
Right.
Jasper is 16 years old.
Yeah.
Jasper was there from way before Daily Wire. I mean, he was around for all the proto Daily Wire things. Like Ben and I had a company called Truth Revolt, a project called Truth Revolt at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and I had Declaration Entertainment, but Jasper was there from day one of the Daily Wire. He came to work every single day. He was on our org chart as chief executive dog. He was physically present for the interviews of the first 100 employees of the company. He went to work every single day at the Daily Wire until the day that my daughter was born. If you don't know much about schnauzers and terriers, and he's kind of a mutt, but these little dogs actually hate kids. They're bad around kids. It's their least. It's the least wonderful thing about these little dogs is that they're just not good with kids. And we were so terrified about how's he going to be toward Dagny because he would bark at kids and lunge at them. He wouldn't bite them, but he would nip at them, or whatever. And Dagny came home, and we set her from the hospital. We set her little crib down, or her little carrier down next to him. And of course, we're both on guard, ready to spring to action and see what we need to do. And he just laid down right next to her and never barked at her because she wasn't a kid. She was his kid. She was part of the pack. So it's such a different kind of, his job is to protect the pack, And from that day, he wouldn't go back to the Daily Wire with me. It'd come time to go to work, and I'd be like, all right, buddy, let's go. And he'd just look at me like, bro, I got a job. I had a job.
I'm here.
I had a job being chief executive dog, and now my job is to guard this kid from all those other little kids who might come around who need to get barked at. So he doesn't move around like he used to because he's an old man, but he's still a good boy.
Yeah, he sits with us in the office all day. Yeah. He's just our little coworker.
He's a little mascot.
He's seen some stuff.
He's seen it all.
Okay, we have a question here that I really like. It's from, I'm going to pronounce it Afghani, although it's not spelled that way, 3947. Question for Jeremy. What are your thoughts on AI filmmaking?
I'm bullish on AI generally. I think AI is going to do a lot of bad things because all new technology does a lot of bad things. I think we'll absorb those bad things, and over time we'll get to really, really good things. And some of the really good things we're already getting to. John is kind of our resident AI innovator.
I sent John, today that Kermit meme where he's like typing furiously. That's John McClaw.
I mean, what you've done with AI in the last 6 weeks is truly it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It really, even for myself, it's like every day I think it's almost exponential. Like people feel that way about AI, like it's all changing so fast. I mean, it was Opus 4.8 yesterday. It's Fable 5 today, before they get to Mythos next, whatever. So these models keep evolving. But it's one of the fortunate things about this moment and starting the way that we are, kind of a blessing in disguise, is you don't have all the systems. So you have to rebuild everything. But we're rebuilding right at the moment that AI exists. And so it's just, you get to approach it from this AI first perspective. Okay, well, how does a media company work? And what are all the pain points that we had before? And there are many. Like, there are a lot of problems, especially on the digital side and building any kind of digital products. And it's just been incredibly slow, labor intensive, and unbelievably expensive, because that talent, the people who knew how to code, was so rare. And so you would have to then, and they're also engineers. So they're a kind of person that they know how to do that thing, but now you're trying to translate some kind of art or creative to an engineer and then marry those two and get a product out of it. And so you would be a year at least in development on some of these pieces. And kind of in the end, not really get what you want. Yeah. It's just a process of kind of being beat down, bit by bit, and accepting all the various kind of concessions of, well, it could do that, but really it's too complicated and we have to do it this way, whatever. And now, I mean, the way that AI works, at least from a coding perspective at the moment, but I think this will translate to film, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But, 2 days ago, I asked it to make me a Google Docs clone. Like, just because we have all these writing problems. Like, we're trying to write the show and you want to share things and you want to collaborate, and Google Docs is amazing in many ways, but it also has some particular flaws, like in the way that we would want to, for what we're trying to do, like a very particular thing that we're trying to do. And that thought would never even have occurred to me in the past. Like, how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars has Google spent creating Google Docs? Like, it's a very sophisticated program. And so I asked it to do it, and it failed. It kind of couldn't do it, and it said, well, you can buy this expensive option and we can integrate it. I don't want to do that. And then it comes out with 5.0 today, and I asked it to make a clone of Google Docs for us, and it says, sure. And it opens up a browser, and it just starts creating immediately. It just starts creating, and it has a text box, and it's typing as different people, and then it's editing the text to check that it can actually edit and verify and all that. Now, it's up, and it's got bugs. And I go, oh man, of course, like, this website's gonna have bugs. There's always issues and all of this. And it's kind of particular to different users. And I thought, well, we need a feedback mechanism for all of this. Like, you have to have a way of collecting that. And again, you get this chance to think from an AI first perspective. There's well-established technologies for reporting bugs, and they're awful, all of them. No one knows how to use them, and every engineer will yell at you for reporting the bug in the incorrect way and not having the right context and all this stuff. And I thought, well, we should just have a really friendly kind of way for everybody to interact with this, And I'd already realized, like, I have all these different AI things going. I'm like, I need this kind of like chief of staff of AI. Like, I need someone that I can go to that manages all the AI things. And so I thought, well, I'll make Jasper. And so I asked Jeremy, I said, can I get a photo of Jasper? He's like, yeah, sure. And so I got a little photo of Jasper, I made a profile, and I was like, all right, team, here you go, Jasper. Now you can ask Jasper, and you can put in feature requests to Jasper, record any bugs. Jasper will get your bug, and he'll ask you follow-up questions and all that. And so Alyssa, last night, I was like, here's the new Instagram dashboard that we have, where it has all the, it's all integrated. And she goes, oh, I wish I could do this. And I said, well, just tell Jasper that, And so she does, and Jasper asks her a couple questions back and forth, and she finally kind of refines it. And then I go in and I say, what did Alyssa ask for? So, well, this. I said, okay, build it. Tomorrow, the next day, she comes in and she goes, oh my gosh, like, it's just there. Like, it just exists.
I just have to say, like, from my perspective, and I'm sure Joel feels the same way, it's crazy because I don't even have time to, John will like say an idea out loud to himself, like, oh, what if we had our own agent? And we'll call it Jasper. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And like, literally the next thing I know, I'm using Jasper. And I'm like, I barely registered that you said that. And now it's doing all of these things that even the Instagram's own dashboard can't provide me. Like, information that's very hard to wrap your arms around.
Once that spark goes off and you realize the potential, it becomes addicting.
Oh yeah.
Like, you could just spend all day in it. And I think especially for creatives, well, for one, it's going to lower the barrier of entry for a lot of creatives. So on the front end, you're going to see a lot more slop and all the stuff that we're seeing with AI now. But in the long term, we're going to see the next great works of art come out of this.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you're going to have all these creatives with these new tools at their disposal, making things that otherwise never would have been made.
Keith downstairs, who does our lighting, was saying the same thing, and I've been talking to him, and he's kind of rebuilding his website, and I get a kick out of it, like helping people see how to use it and learn a little bit, and he just said it's just incredible. He's like, I used to spend so many hours in Photoshop trying to like iterate and just like all this like really tedious work, and all you're really trying to do is kind of visualize in reality your idea that's in your head, but like it doesn't always work and it doesn't make sense. But you've spent so much time just trying to get to that point to decide whether you even like that direction or not. And he's like, now I can do 100 of them. So I can go to these image generators, I can just see so many variations and so many senses of direction. He's like, so I think what a lot of people worry about is like it kills creativity. And I'm like, I've never had so much freedom of expression before. In this field in particular, there's aspects about how we're going to run the business. They're going to be completely transformed and empowered. But Alyssa, I think you've made a great point too, which is it's not really like it takes away any work. It actually just increases
raises
expectations.
the bar. Yeah, right.
As soon as you have Jasper and a feature request, I know what's going to happen the next time you put one in. If it's not in the next morning, it's going to be like, why didn't that feature go? Why didn't that feature go live?
Right.
Like, of course I have Google Docs. Why wouldn't I have a custom Google Docs?
You only built 4 websites this week? Come on, pick
Yeah,
it up.
exactly.
Yeah, well, and it also increases the expectations for myself because now I know I can do things at a fraction of the rate that it would have taken me before. So now I have an obligation to use that time to do even more because all of us in here could relate that it doesn't matter what we do, it doesn't matter what we accomplish, there's just always a list of more that you could and should be doing, and so you move on to the next thing, and this just means that you're going after all that much faster.
And this is why I think like when people ask about filmmaking, I know a lot of people ask and they probably haven't experienced actual filmmaking. Some of them do. It's incredibly complex. Every film is an entire Daily Wire company spun up to go on this endeavor to create. So just the amount of work and the amount of creativity, like if you just think about, you say, well, is AI going to make movies? You're like, what do you mean? Like, is the AI going to make all of Daily Wire and do all of, no, that's like humans all throughout that entire process. Now, can every one of those humans be exponentially better at what they do with the advent of AI? And will it transform maybe even fundamentally, what you do in the process? Well, yeah, absolutely. That's actually the very exciting opportunity, is to approach it that way and say, oh, now with this superpower, what can we do? Like, we just moved from black and white to full color, and you're like upset about that?
Right.
Like, no, like take advantage of it and let's create more than we've ever created before.
This is exactly right. The transition from film to digital cinematography that happened 20 years ago disrupted jobs. I mean, there were guys who worked in labs who don't have jobs now. There were guys who worked in the daily, the process of bringing dailies to set that don't have jobs anymore. But more movies got made. More people had jobs, not fewer people. More people had jobs. There were some very specific people who were disrupted by that. That is going to happen. And people say, well, this is different in kind. No, it isn't. It may be that it's different in scale. And that'll be one of the painful parts of the disruption. I'm not even sure that that's exactly going to prove to be true. I think that it's going to be, I think that the disruptions will probably be more manageable than people believe that they're going to be, because I think there's going to be such an increase in productivity, and we're already feeling it, that the jobs are just not disrupted at the level that some of the doomsayers, including some of the people who are making it, who also have bad ideas and don't know how the world works sometimes, even though they're very, very gifted and intelligent people, smarter than us. I think we're already seeing that some of those early fears were unfounded. But when I think about AI filmmaking, is it possible that one day you'll be able to write some prompts and get a movie out? Sure, yeah, that's possible. I'm largely skeptical that even that will result in movies, because I've thought many times, you have to have IP protections really to have the country work. But I always think it's dumb when somebody's like, you stole my idea. It's like, ideas are cheap. Ideas mean nothing. Execution is everything. Execution's the whole business. I have this great buddy. Rod the Falconer Taylor, who's a great screenwriter and a great poet, one of the greatest living poets, truly, and a great songwriter who had 7 records with David Geffen back in the 70s and 80s. I mean, he's a unbelievably talented guy. And he used to get calls from people saying, hey, would you mind if my kid called you? They have this idea for a movie. And he'd be like, yeah, no. Ideas, like, what do you want me to, I've had your idea. I'm a professional writer. I've had your idea. There's no ideas I haven't had. For a living, I have ideas. You think Steven Spielberg's first guy who came up with, let's make a movie about dinosaurs? I had that idea. Like, what are you talking about? So Steven Spielberg's the guy who made the movie.
That's right.
With the dinosaurs. And so I just think everything's hard. I've thought this about business. Like, I've always been very open with Daily Wire competitors about what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like, our buddy Tyler Carden would call me over the years. He's the CEO of The Blaze, very talented guy. And he'd be kind of cagey, you know. I'd be like, hey, how are things going over at The Blaze? And then he'd say, how are things going at the Daily Wire? And I'd be like, oh, by the end of it, I'd have a dry erase board out, you know. And then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do this. Because my view has always just sort of been like, it doesn't matter if people know everything. They're not going to do it. Doing is hard. No one's ever going to. Tyler is a doer and fully capable of doing. But for the most part, people do not do. Yeah. The world is divided between those who do and those who don't. And my patented Jeremy advice that I've been giving for years is those who do, do. And those who don't, don't. You can give those who don't anything you want. Give them the blueprint to the building, give them the screenplay, give them the ideas, give them your business plan for all the good it's going to do them. And for those who do, you don't need any of that stuff from anybody because you're going to take whatever resources are available to you and you're just going to go. And if you're that person, you're going to do great things in your life because you're going to do anything in your life and other people won't. But so I feel the same way about AI filmmaking. It's going to create more opportunity. There's going to be there's going to be a ton of slop. Yes, some people's jobs are going to be disrupted. There's going to be the greatest works of art that have ever come into existence. It's not all just going to be derivative. That's probably true in the earliest days of this thing. But we're going to find out how to get more and more original concepts. It's going to be a lot like CG. Mm-hmm. You couldn't have Jurassic Park without CG. Jurassic Park's one of the great movies of the age of cinema. You know, it's Steven Spielberg's, I think it's his summer blockbuster masterpiece. I think it he created the summer blockbuster really with Raiders of the Lost Ark. Mm-hmm. And I think he perfected the summer blockbuster with Jurassic Park. And Jurassic Park doesn't exist without CG. The Phantom Menace also doesn't exist without CG. And the Phantom Menace, listen, I love George Lucas. He made some of the great movies, but the Phantom Menace is awful. The CG is awful.
We got some great memes, though.
We got some great memes. And Jurassic Park is wonderful. And CG made both of those things possible. And that's how it's going to be with AI. There's going to be a lot of things that are made that are worse than if people had just made them. We know George Lucas could make things look better when people just made them, because we got Star Wars and Empire and Return of the Jedi. We know that CG can look better, because even if you go fast forward, another decade and go to the Star Wars sequels, Last Jedi, et cetera, we might have all kinds of problems with them from a plot point of view or storytelling point of view. The CG looks great. Mm-hmm. Millennium Falcon, digital Millennium Falcon looks just as good as model Millennium Falcon, but you can do a lot more with it, a lot faster, a lot less expensively. The difference is really the hands of the artistry, the evolution of the technology over time, how we think about it, how we use it. You can use CG to make James Bond surf like they did in that last Pierce Brosnan movie, which should never have been allowed. People should have. You talk about losing your job in Hollywood. Like that.
I was going to say, there's a lot of bad movies made by people.
There's a lot of bad movies that don't have CG.
Yes, that's right.
A lot of bad movies that don't have CG. A lot of bad movies that don't have AI. There's going to be a lot of great movies that do. And our job, anytime there's emerging technology, is to synthesize it into the things that we're making that are good, and not to rely on them to do things that make us worse. And that's just, like every other thing that humans do, we're going to fail at it, and it's going to be halting, and we're going to kind of reach through the darkness, and over time we'll find it, and it'll be. People are like, well, I'm going to be the guy who only goes to movies that are made the old-fashioned way. Like, man, it's probably not true. There'll probably be a niche for that, like there's still a niche for 45s, and they sound awesome. They're high fidelity, sound really, really good. But even people who love that kind of stuff, most of the time you're still listening to an MP3, because most of the time you're on the fly, on your iPhone or whatever. I think it'll be kind of like that.
Yeah. Okay, our last question. I think you'll like it. From Sika Pollen. Jeremy, what is important to you in a friendship?
let me go last. I want to hear everybody else's answer so then I can crib the best things that you say and make it sound original.
Oh no, I didn't think of an answer for myself.
Joel, you've got one or two friends.
Yeah, you three here. No. Important in a friendship. I've not always been the best friend. It's something I've been open that I admit I struggle with, and I think that's just maybe it's more of a guy thing. I don't know, but just the maintenance part of being a friend. Checking up on people. Spending time. The things you have to do to maintain a friendship. All my best friends in the world have been people who have just always checked up on me. But it's always been very one-sided. I think the thing that as a Christian, the thing that is important as a friend in walking through life with somebody is to is to pray for them and check up on them spiritually. That's the best friends that I've had in the world have never been afraid to ask me, like, how are you doing in your relationship with God? How are you doing spiritually? And so, yeah, I think that would probably be my answer. I think it's little touch points and maintenance and care for someone's spiritual state over a long period of time, being faithful, serving and caring for them. I guess that would be my answer.
Yeah, where you go? Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
It's a live show, guys.
shared struggle. Shared struggle. I think that you are kind of trying to do something in life. Hopefully, it's aimed at the good. Like virtuous. And I think when you align with somebody on that and kind of pull together, of course, faith is a huge component of that. That's an overarching element. So you find a lot of it in that. But even outside of that, just looking for that. And then as you draw close with people, I think over time, just a lot of opportunity arises in that kind of work. So like, in the college years, it's studying and it's learning, and it's in the Marine Corps, it was obviously fighting. And you end up experiencing and have a lot of opportunities to bear one another's burdens and also share one another's joys. And those things just, I think, bond you together in a way that become very, very deep, and I think in an eternal sense too. But I do think that it's someone who challenges you. That's probably where my deepest friendships come from, is someone who pushes me, like makes me want to be better than I am, And maybe that's through actually pointing something out, and there's some level of accountability, or just through inspiration. Like they're just better than me. Like, wow, I gotta raise my game. I'm drawn to that. I'm drawn to people who have admirable marriages, who have are admirable fathers, work very hard. So even if I'm not working with them, like I can see that in them, and I go, that's someone that I would really like to be friends with, and kind of have in my orbit and influence me and my family too.
Yeah, I've actually thought a lot about this, and I've had a similar thought to you, Joel. I've thought, like, I don't know if I'm a very good friend, but I do have I have a few close friends with whom I've been close for 1 to 2 decades. So long-term friendships. And I think the thing that's common among those is those are people that I've had to work through conflict with, like where we've both in different seasons have shown up at our worst and offended the other one and hurt the other one, and instead of letting that become the reason to go our separate ways, which I've had plenty of friendships that have ended that way, actually overcoming it and each person growing on the other side. And I also, my whole life, I always wanted to be an adult. I always wanted to hang out with the adults. I wanted to hang out with my parents and my aunts and uncles. I was friends with my teachers. And I think John, a lot of that is similar to what you were just saying. I think I didn't know I wanted this, but I always wanted to be around people that I thought were better than me, because I was always looking at like where I could go, how far I could go. And the other thing that I've really come to value in friendships is people who are doing the same thing, who are always kind of looking to grow and move forward. And so then if you're both growing, then your companionship can sustain through that growth. You're not outgrowing, one over the other, because you're both kind of, in that same pursuit.
Yeah. I will borrow from all three of you. When I was a kid, I had a lot of adult friends, and I was friends with my teachers, and I was in theater, of course, and so in the evenings I would go do plays, and it was all people, I was 14, 15, 16, and it was all people in their 30s and 40s and 50s and at the theater. And I still had friends my age as well, and even friends younger than me. In some ways, it's that age has never really existed in my mind as any sort of actual reality. And when I was young, that manifested mostly in having friends who were older. I consider like Alan Estrin of PragerU, who's notably older than me, to be one of a dear friend to me today, or Dennis Prager on a different level, to be a dear friend today. But even when I was a teenager, I had friends who fought in the Vietnam War. Wow. So and with whom I remain friends. So when I was young, it manifested in that way more. One thing I've had to be conscious of as I've gotten older is that when young kids, I say young kids, and I really mean anything from, one of John's kids to some 24-year-old working at the Daily Wire or something, like that, I never feel any barrier to friendship with them either. If they, it never occurs to me that I'm old and shouldn't be, friends with them. Now, I've developed some discipline around that just because I'm aware that there's like propriety, but only like an awareness of propriety impedes the relationship. I just don't care really about people's age. I think that adults were very generous with me when I was young and gave me opportunities to reach and to stretch and to grow, and treated me like a person, didn't treat me like a kid. So I try to be conscious of that. And to pay that same kind of respect toward young people now. A place where I also, of course, agree in the sense that like shared struggle is a major source of friendship. There's that, to quote the Bard, finding love is just a dance of proximity and chance, right? Some parts of friendship are just proximity and chance. It's like you get put in a situation with someone, there's no rhyme or reason to that, but now you're in the situation, and that proximity over time breeds relationship, more so when the time is being spent in pursuit of important things, shared mission, shared values, but not exclusively that. Like when you're in high school or junior high, you got thrown in with some guys, you didn't really share a mission, but they're just the guys. They were the guys who were around, and you form sometimes lifelong bonds out of that. And the last place where I would say that we're all, I resonate to things you guys have said is sometimes feeling like you're a bad friend. A thing that's, I want to come back to that though, after saying a place where we're different. I don't have friendships that have like ended and we've gone our separate ways. I have lots of friends who I have not spoken to in 20 years. If any one of them called me today, I'm there. Now, when I say I'm not great at maintaining friendships, I'm not great at the maintenance of friendships. I'm not a great buddy, in part because I've collected a lot of friends throughout my life, because I don't stop being friends with people. Because once you're in, and you're just always on the list. And so I'm always available to you in moments. And so it happens to me all the time that somebody I haven't talked to in 20 years calls me, and then I feel, for whatever reason, they called me with a need, or I kind of assume if they called me, it's with a need, maybe not even a conscious need, maybe just been a need to talk to me. But I always meet them right there, instantly I meet them, which then means that in your day-to-day friendship, sometimes you're not doing the normal maintenance. I also focus extensively on work, as the whole conversation tonight probably evidences. And so I'm not a great buddy. Like I'm not the guy who goes out for drinks after work. I'm not the guy. I don't go out. I work and I come home to my family. Like that's kind of always been true. I've always been a little bit of a homebody in that sense. But I have a wide collection of friends, and I'm always available to any of them. Like I endeavor to always be available to any of them, even though I'm not great at the maintenance of day-to-day buddyhood with anybody. And so what's important to me in a friendship, we tend to value from people what we give to people. Which sometimes is a bad way to navigate relationships because people have actually different needs than we do. But I would say on a fundamental level, since that's how I treat friendship, I probably do have some expectation of that. I suppose what I mean is that friendship means a lot to me. Friendship is a very high value, to me, which is why I never quit on a friend. I'm sort of famously not a grudge holder. People have done me a lot of wrong over the years, as everybody's been done a lot of wrong over the years. I very rarely hang on to that for too long. Sometimes people don't know how to interact with me in a business setting because I can be a bit mercurial. I can lose my temper. I'm very demanding, and I can be working for me. It's a very taxing thing to work for me. And sometimes people walk in and like they get their ears blown back a little bit, and they think that something just happened, but nothing happened. Like, I don't hang on. Well, even if I was angry, I don't hang on to that anger very often at all. Very rare that somebody like gets on my bad side or whatever that would mean. Like, can't say it's never happened, but it's very rare. I just don't. I'm kind of in this moment. We're going to solve the thing that we need to solve. Sometimes that requires a little force or a little. I got to put a little pep in your step, and then we move on. So sometimes I'm surprised that other people don't treat friendship or any relationship that way. That sometimes people do hold a grudge, or sometimes people betray you in ways that are surprising. I've said before that I felt very betrayed by Steven Crowder. We were not friends in a deep sense, but Crowder, I ascribed to Crowder friendship, whatever that means, and so he was on the list, and Crowder could and did. Crowder could call me anytime. He did call me often over the years when something was going on or he had some thought or he was trying to suss something out. I was always available to him. And while we didn't hang out, we didn't have drinks, and we didn't go on couples days, we weren't friends in that like deep friendship way, but he was on the list. And in my view, if you're on the list, you're on the list. So then when he does what he did, which was certainly not an act of friendship, I'm shocked. Now, from his point of view, and I won't defend his behavior because I think his behavior was egregious, but I'll defend that his view of friendship is certainly not what my view of friendship is. From his point of view, it might just be like, yeah, Jeremy's some kind of half colleague. We weren't really friends. We didn't hang out. Why did I owe him anything? And that might even be a realistic view, but it's just not my view. And so it was very shocking when he behaved the way he did. And yet, even at that, I don't hold a grudge even against Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder is kind of an ass, and I think what he did was really horrible, and it really hurt it hurt me. I was injured, but whatever. If Steven Crowder called me tomorrow, everybody at work, Caleb and John were mad at me in real time. They were like, I was like, what are you guys mad about? They're like, well, we're just mad because we know that this son of a bitch is going to call you in 6 weeks, and it's going to be like none of this ever happened, and we're madder than you are. We don't want you to do that. We want you to hold a grudge. Yeah. But I don't. I'm not even saying that it's virtuous that I don't. I think there are times where you need to hold a grudge, but I don't hold a grudge. That's a thing. Because friendship is just important. So I move through life as though that were true. I have lost friends. I've had my first actual injury that I don't know how to overcome in the last short while, and it's I actually don't even have the word for what it is. It's insanely disruptive. I don't know how to deal with it. I can't find a box to put it in. Nothing in my experience of life has given me a box in which to put it. You've lost friends. And so I think it's a very natural thing, a normal thing. I think most people have lost friends, but I haven't lost friends really in my life. Nobody's ever done anything that I couldn't let go of. I've never had that kind of an injury before where a relationship has sort of One doesn't want to use the word permanent because I know that God is God and life happens and things change and who knows what the future is. But what certainly feels like a permanent separation before. And it's like a spiritual crisis. Truly, it's a spiritual crisis, an ongoing spiritual crisis. I can't get to relief about it. I can't get to. It is not processed. I don't know how to process it. I have not been able to process it. And so I don't know what to learn from it. There are things that you want to learn in moments of pain, and I think that they're often the wrong lesson. So I've tried not to learn the wrong lesson. When you're injured, Steven Crowder betrays you. You could say, well, I'm just never going to trust anybody again. Well, that's a natural thing to feel, but what a stupid lesson to try to walk away from any sort of interaction with. So, in that moment, obviously the takeaway from this isn't don't trust people. I made myself very available to my friends, though. I don't have friends for whom I wouldn't take a bullet. I don't have friends for whom I wouldn't sacrifice. And so once you sort of orient your life that way, it's very hard to know what to do when someone stops being that. So I don't know. What do I value in friendship? I suppose what I value in friendship is a kind of loyalty that says, because we are friends, there are reasonable expectations for how we might treat one another and relate to one another. Because I pour into my friends, not in great day-to-day maintenance, not in great buddyhood, but I pour into my friends. I give to my friends whatever is available that I have, I give to my friends. Even spiritually, I give whatever I have to my friends. Then probably unfairly, I sort of expect that that's just true. And I don't know what to do about the fact that it isn't true. So I don't know. I would say that friendship is a thing that I'm in real time wrestling with at 47 years old. I'm asking questions about friendship that I haven't asked in the past. I do know that when God said it isn't good for man to be alone, the first thing that he gives man is a helpmate. But that's not the last thing that he gives man. I know that a wife is important, but friends are very important in this life. You have to have, men need men in their lives. Women need women in their lives. You have to have those people who you can carry certain kinds of struggles with and to, and who will put you on the right course and check on you in the right ways and be available to you in the right ways. And I don't like when husbands and wives call each other their best friends, because I think that I think it's a thing that sounds like it's supposed to be good, but it isn't. It both manages to denigrate spouse and friend. A friend is different than a spouse, more and less, and a spouse is much more and less than a friend. You're supposed to have both of these things in your life, and so I think that what a blessing that God's given us to have friends, and what a thing that we should take seriously and steward better than any of us do, and care for better than any of us do, because we have a long way to go in life, and we need people who will carry those burdens alongside us. That's the last question?
No one asked about the key.
Oh, you're right.
Did somebody ask about the key?
Someone did ask about the key. I forgot about it. And actually, not only did someone ask about it, which I've seen a few comments now where people asking about the key, but we have a little conspiracy theory brewing.
I like to
in
debunk
the comments.
conspiracy theories.
Yeah, so someone asked, what is the key on your necklace? Is it a little bent? And then someone replied to that comment.
A little.
He seems to be signaling bent key is why he's no longer at the Daily Wire.
Well, first of all, that's very funny. It's very funny because of the way that people read information.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say it's very like Taylor Swift does these things where she'll wear a piece of jewelry and her fans are like, this means something. And
It's Brett Cooper's blue sweater.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
The bent key is not the blue sweater.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah. I've been wearing this key's been around my neck every single day for over 30 years. So the idea that it has anything to do with leaving Daily Wire is really funny. The correct read would be, why is bent key called bent key?
Right.
Bent key is called bent key because I've had this bent key around my neck for 30 years. And
I think we actually have a picture
of the bent key.
Yeah. I
Look
assume
at that
people
handsome
can see
devil.
it on the screen.
I can't believe that's you.
16-year-old Jeremy.
Look how silver the key is. It's back before all the top layer wore off of it.
Look at that hair.
I had beautiful hair. I miss having beautiful hair.
You still have great hair, but that's just very like cool.
Well, my
90s
my hair now is like the best money can buy. That's not the same as having naturally beautiful hair. You know? This is 3 hair transplants. That's 3 hair transplants ago. You know, what a picture. That is 16 years old with my buddy Todd doing a concert. We were putting on this concert, and I'm glad you guys blurred him out, because I won't say his last name because he may not have wanted to be on the show. But Todd was my childhood best friend, and that's us punching above our weight class there, putting on a show we're pretty proud of at the time. But yeah, that's almost 30 years ago. Look, there's the key.
Wow.
You can bet on that day I was wearing it because of being pushed out of the Daily Wire, right?
Right.
Somehow I knew.
You foresaw.
But it is just funny how people read information.
Yeah.
That people are like, oh, well, the bent key must be because of... No. What if it was the other way? What if bent key is because of my bent key?
Right.
But people
Wouldn't it be
are only
too hard to
operating with the
figure out?
information that they have. But this is how true conspiracies get
Right.
formed.
But I appreciated a budding conspiracy around the Jeremy lore.
It's also, I think it's appropriate for a podcast that started off talking about the USS Liberty to end on
Yeah.
to end on my bent key.
Well,
One
now
day I'll
everyone's
tell the
gonna
full.
Wonder what the story is, and I want to just say, tune in next time, and maybe you'll hear it, maybe not.
Right. We're getting closer to discovering
yeah,
the true story of the bent
More
key.
details are
But you have
coming
to tune in
out.
next week.
Guys, we're getting much closer.
We have explosive new evidence.
Tune in next week, friends. We'll see you there.